Good afternoon, Senators. Today is the 2nd of August, 2023, afternoon session. Prior to the suspension for the lunch break, Senator the Honorable Darren Pickstock was making his contribution to the Protection of Violence Bill. I believe we are now ready to proceed. As many. The Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Darren Pickstock.
Thank you. Madam President, thank you very much. Madam President, before I left, I was on my feet, but I wish to remind those listening just about the importance of this bill. I wish to also restate, if I may, and give an overview of the importance of this bill. Madam President, the Protection Against Violence Bill 2023 is a comprehensive legislation designed to provide protection and support for victims of violence in the Bahamas. The bill not only seeks to uphold the nation's commitment under international conventions, such as the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, and the Inter-American Convention on the Prevention, Punishment, and Eradication of Violence Against Women, but also creates a domestic framework for supporting victims, handling complaints, and raising public awareness. Madam President, at its core, the bill proposes the creation of the Protection Against Violence Commission and Secretariat. These bodies will coordinate various stakeholders, grant funding, and provide technical assistance to strengthen the national response to violence. The bill also prescribes sensitivity training for law enforcement and support personnel, and includes provision for raising public awareness on problems of and remedies for violence against women. Moreover, the bill defines a comprehensive set of rights for victims, including the right to compassion, dignity, confidentiality, privacy. It establishes protocol for complaint handling by victims and details the procedures when violence results in death. Madam President, the government is fully committed to implementing and protecting the rights of all people, including the rights of women and girls, Madam President. Madam President, the government is committed to the safety and well-being of all Bahamians. The Protection Against Violence Bill 2023 is a testament to this commitment, Madam President. It ensures that victims of violence are not left without support and can access the help they need. Madam President, lastly, before I move on to my contribution, the bill not only aligns us with international standards, but it also cements our commitment, Madam President, to eradicate violence, particularly violence against women, as stipulated under the Convention of Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women and the Inter-American Convention on the Prevention of Punishment and Eradication of Violence Against Women. Madam President, I would also submit that it would be disingenuous for any stakeholder to take it personally that any suggestion they put forward has not found itself into the bill, or if it has, it is not there to the extent they may have wished, Madam President. Legislation that works for the betterment of society is about compromise, work, effort, and bringing people along. And Madam President, I would submit that this bill is a compilation of our society or of the government working together and working in an effort to bring people along. As we have already heard from members before me, including strongly by our Attorney General, that there was consultation, widespread consultation. We have also heard, Madam President, that this bill was on the books from 2016, and between the years of 2017 and 2021, Madam President, the bill sat dormant until the Progressive Liberal Party government picked the bill up. And now we are here today about to pass this bill into law. Madam President, history will also show that the success of nearly all of the progressive or radical legislative improvements in this country required a solid and steadfast grassroots movement and energy. People have to be brought along, and it does not matter to the Bahamian people what the convention is or what any group or organization feels is their agenda or in the country's best interests. The Bahamian people will not be dictated to, and that's as simple as that, Madam President. When the sexual offenses legislation was passed in Parliament in 1985, there was similar high emotions. The church rallied against the lawful age a female could give consent, and many lost their minds over the assertion of what consenting adults were allowed to do in the privacy of their living spaces. Prime Minister Hubert Ingraham had to buck a very skeptical Free National movement when he signed on to a convention on issues already legislated in the Sexual Offences Act, which many still differ with. And then there are the mischief makers who try to paint everything as an agenda. Madam President, Parliament just passed a resolution on human rights and how reports on human rights will be given and discussed on a timely basis. A lot has been said about what some assume or presume are the absence of certain human rights in this bill. I once again respectfully remind the nation that the issues in this bill are far more fundamental and dynamic to our way of life. I will repeat that, Madam President. I respectfully remind the nation that the issues in this bill are far more fundamental and dynamic to our way of life because it is all-encompassing. It is capturing not only women and our little girls, but our boys and our men and our young men, Madam President. The bill is all about all. The bill is about all of the people, all of the time, not a small unit of people some of the time. Therefore, it will take some time, and rightfully so, for more of what is being proposed or suggested to find its way into future amendments, possibly. The Bahamian people, in my opinion, are also very wary of commissions and bodies collecting personal data and private details which are not statute bound to the government. Madam President, I will repeat that because it's an important point. The Bahamian people, in my opinion, are also very wary of commissions and bodies collecting their personal and private details which are not statute bound to the government. Madam President, the Bahamian people deserve to see this bill given a fair chance to get out there and do its thing. There are some who feel that the energy of some of the criticism about this bill was unworthy and did not have to be done openly. The Bahamian people, whom the bill and the stakeholders wish to protect, are deserving of confidence and hope, and a strong message has to be sent to offenders that we are beyond zero tolerance. In my opinion, any bill of this nature which did not encompass the boys and the men, runs the risk of acceptance and adherence and would not have provided the urgent incentive for men and boys to also enthusiastically support the women and girls. Madam President, that's an important point that needs repeating. In my opinion, any bill of this nature which did not encompass the boys and men runs the risk of acceptance and adherence and would not have provided the urgent incentive of men and women to also enthusiastically support the women and girls, Madam President. It has to be accepted. And to have the boys and men be lookouts for the less vulnerable among us, Madam President. Sexual crimes are a phenomenon.
Point of the men's desk at the Department of Gender.
Absolutely, absolutely. That is the point of the men's desk. Sexual crimes are a phenomenon of the most evil proportions. In a nation of under 450,000 citizens and residents, where our bloodlines are close and our communities so intertwined, this phenomenon ought to not even exist in this country. I began my discourse by accepting Senator Barnett Ellis's invitation for a wider discussion on the culture of rape in our nation. I have attempted to show that it has never been an isolated to the terrible violent acts we read about on the front page of the newspapers, Madam President. We have heard so much in the last few days on where the Bahamas sits statistically in the region of sexual crimes and violent gender crimes. There are more churches in the Bahamas than there are illegal houses of prostitution. And so researchers may tell us one day that maybe, just maybe, the call for the legalization of sex workers by stakeholders is another discussion we should have. This is a call to my generation and to our generation and Senator Ellis's generation and Senator Maxine Seymour's generation to take up the gauntlet and dare to say that which must be said and dare to do that which must be done. The time for admonitions from a bygone era are beyond us now. Are beyond us. No, I'm not calling for that. I'm talking about this bill. The gods of the ages gave us the wisdom and understanding to move with the diligence, discernment, and intelligence and faith provided for a time such as this. Madam President, let the bickering and the finger pointing and the blame game end, and end now. We have tears to wipe from many eyes, Madam President. We have children whose safety depends on us, Madam President. We are all on the same team here on this topic, Madam President. Let not the criminal find another second of pleasure and comfort because we are divided and not on the same page. Let's get out there and get them before they get us. Madam President, this legislation, the Protection from Violence Bill, is where we start today. A nation desperately needs all of us to arrive at this loftier goal. I thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable Darren Pickstock. Ooh. Hey. As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Maxine Seymour.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I rise to contribute on the Protection Against Violence Bill 2023 and would like to extend not just welcome, but gratitude and appreciation to the many persons who represented various NGOs and political and other organizations, just general civic society grouping that came to visit with us in the Senate today. Indeed, they do such a work in our community, a work that I don't know where we would be without them, because we need the support of all of us, whether that's the church, the government, civic groupings, to really help keep our country ticking. And so I extend a welcome to them to the Senate today. Madam President, the government is duty-bound to protect citizens and residents of the Bahamas. And yes, Madam President, my colleagues are right. That duty-bound extends to all citizens and residents. And like I've said on many occasions, my personal goal is to create a Bahamas for all Bahamians. And that's every Bahamian, Madam President, man, woman, boy, girl, able-bodied, persons with disabilities, whether they're Exumian, Nasuvian, Long Islanders, like my friend here, whether they're Androsian, Biminites, wherever they're from. We are all entitled to the rights and privileges that come with citizenship of our sovereign nation. And so, Madam President, I am pleased that the government has broadened the scope of protection and tabled the current bill here today. I am all for inclusion, but not at the expense of women and girls who are disproportionately impacted by gender-based violence. Madam President, spin it any way you like. And I'm no lawyer, but they could spin it any way they like. The reality is that this bill does not comprehensively address gender-based violence. And we've heard from many experts on that, and my colleague spoke quite comprehensively and adequately to it earlier, as did Marian Bethel and so many other persons representing NGOs and civil society. Madam President, you know, this New Day administration's approach to governance leaves me feeling like Spider-Man some days, you know, trapped in the mirror dimension by Dr. Strange. I'll tell you, it's like we are in a parallel dimension in which the government wants us to believe that the Protection Against Violence Bill mimics the gender-based violence bill. Just like that scene in Spider-Man, Senator Pickstock, the bill is complete with the same surroundings and inhabitants, but its visual appearance is distorted, like fractured mirror. I am no lawyer, but I have the sense to know, based on what I've heard and what I've read, that the Protection of Violence Bill and gender-based violence bill are not the same. It's a New Day mirror dimension, Madam President, in which the government often insists that it consults, but somehow the retailers and the pharmacists and the contractors and the business persons, the chamber, the realtors, the insurers, the fishermen, the church, and in this instance, champions of women's rights tend to differ. Madam President, I'm sure that all senators in here would agree that all lives matter. But Black lives matter because Blacks are disproportionately impacted by racism and violence perpetrated against Black people. So some may say that Black Lives Matter is divisive and that it excludes other races. So let's say that all lives matter. Let's be inclusive. Let's protect everyone, like the opposite side is saying here today. However, Madam President, while all lives do matter, when the Black Lives Matter movement was established, and still today, everyone was not being stigmatized and marginalized and discriminated against like Black people were and are. Estimates published by WHO indicate that globally, about 1 in 3, and that's 30% of women worldwide, have been subjected to either physical and/or sexual intimate partner violence and non-partner sexual violence in their lifetime. According to the UN, although anyone, and that's women, girls, men, and boys, can fall victim to violence simply because of their sex or gender, women and girls are especially at risk. It is estimated, like I said, that 1 in 3 women will experience sexual or physical violence in their lifetime. Madam President, I am supporting this bill today because I will always support the protection and empowerment of every single Bahamian. And to borrow a thought from the good Vice President, if a bill helps just one person, then I am all for it. But we cannot deny that there is a need to consider legislation that specifically addresses gender-based violence. Madam President, if I walk into a room that is socioeconomically diverse, and I have $3,000 in my pocket and decide to give everyone $100, the reality is that everyone can use $100, even the ultra-high net worth people in the room. Madam President, and then I can boast that I am gifting everyone and making sure that everyone has some money, because that's inclusion. However, the single mom of 6 in the corner of that room whose rent is overdue and has nothing in her cupboards or refrigerator, the mom whose children have no shoes or clothes, whose electricity is off, the one whose roof is leaking, the woman who needs more financial consideration than the person who is going to use the $100 you gave him to tip the valet, who perhaps fetches his car. Madam President, while we know that men are impacted by all forms of violence, and in fact may find it difficult to report sexual abuse because of societal stereotypes, we must acknowledge and accept that regrettably women and girls are disproportionately impacted because of their gender. And yes, that was acknowledged here today in the moving, in the seconding, and in subsequent speakers. Yet we talk about inclusion when we know and acknowledge that, like said in June past by the Minister of National Security, that according to official statistics released by the police force, rape reports on New Providence were up by a concerning 64% in the first 5 months of 2023 compared to the same period in the previous year. And we know that that number likely represents women and girls. Women and girls, Madam President, like the 30-year-old driving along Marshall Road who slowed down at an intersection only to be held at gunpoint, pulled into bushes, and sexually assaulted. Or like the 32-year-old woman walking in the Fleming Street area who accepted a ride from a familiar male only to be sexually assaulted at gunpoint on a dirt road off Gladstone Road. Madam President, women like the 2 elderly women who were raped in their homes, or the 17-year-old who caught a ride in the rain. These are only recent examples. There are too many to recall, Madam President. And the legislation needs to specifically and explicitly focus on women and girls because that is where the perpetrators direct their focus. Whether we accept it or not, there's a rape culture in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And a rape culture is a culture in which rape and sexual violence are common. You know, where we normalize and trivialize and make excuses for sexualized violence. And this may include sexist jokes, and we hear them all the time. Victim blaming, sexual objectification, that is the Bahamas in which we live. And we, of course, help to reinforce that rape culture by promoting strict gender roles. As I've said before, Madam President, and I'll say it again, competence and capability are not influenced by gender. Women are equally as proficient as men are. Social constructs continue to be the challenge, Madam President, and for centuries, women have been steered towards certain careers and activities. And this societal pigeonholing has limited doors of opportunity for women, and in my opinion, made us more susceptible to rape and acts of sexual violence. Madam President, the right to privacy is very important, and so I'm happy that it's addressed here. Because in our country, I would say that spreading news is almost like a national talent. But I encourage the public to avoid blaming victims and exposing details of their ordeals and experiences to others. As a society, we should gossip the gospel if we want something to gossip. The reality is that when you are faced with sexual violence, it's hard enough to move on and forget. And there are sufficient visual reminders and triggers, I'm sure, everywhere they go. Perhaps they don't drive past that particular road anymore where they may have been attacked. Some of them may not be able to sleep at night. And so whispers do not help. And the public needs to know that. And standing there, recording an incident of a woman being dragged through the streets on your mobile phone, instead of calling the police or trying to help in some way, is not useful to anyone. The impact of violence and sexual violence in particular on those who are assaulted cannot be overstated. And it leads to depression at the very least. And as Senator Roll Turner said, depression isn't something you could just shake it off. It's not something you shake it off. Madam President, women remain disproportionately impacted by many of our laws, policies, practices, and regulations. And yes, this bill here today may cover women in some way. I liken it to the gender-based violence bill that was worked on for over a decade, being a legislative pavilion of sorts. And here it is now, the government opened up an umbrella and said to the women and children, come under it with everybody else. And yes, there's some protection there, but I cannot take this as some magic pill to say that this is the same as the gender-based violence bill. I'm going with Marian Bethel and the other experts on this, and we acknowledge that it's not the same, and I'm happy that you acknowledge it's not the same, but we need to look at whether or not our legislation needs to address gender-based violence beyond here, and specifically, Madam President. Madam President, a Bahamian woman who gives birth to a beautiful newborn baby with a non-Bahamian husband by her side elsewhere in the world still cannot automatically pass on her citizenship. That, Madam President, does not require inclusive legislation. It requires legislation to specifically address a gender gap, just as we do specific laws on gender-based violence, just as my colleague earlier, Senator Michael Barnett Ellis, established. And so, Madam President, as I said at the outset, I support the Protection Against Violence Bill 2023 and the comprehensive protection it gives. But I encourage this administration to consider additional and specific protections for women and girls and not leave them dependent on generalized language or a generalized bill. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable Maxine Seymour, for your contribution. As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Kirkland Russell.
So we got strong Grand Bahama presence today. Come on.
Give me, lady.
Back to back.
Yes, sir.
Where you gonna be? AG? AG, maybe in the other place.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Madam President, what a glorious Wednesday. We have arrived here in this honorable chambers in sound mind and body, fully prepared to represent the best interests of the Bahamian people. And for this and all my many blessings, I am eternally thankful to Almighty God. I continue to offer prayers and support for the Prime Minister, the Honorable Philip Edward Davis, who has not only afforded me this opportunity to be a part of his New Day government, but I thank him for his continued support. Indeed, he is a man of great compassion. Madam President, with your leave, I wish to preface my contribution by extending sincere condolences to the family of the late Larry Wildgoose. Madam President, on Sunday afternoon, under the patronage of Their Excellencies Sir Cornelius Smith and Lady Clara Smith, Urban Renewal Northern Bahamas, along with the Grand Bahama Independence Committee, hosted Lift Every Voice and Sing concert. And Pastor Larry was instrumental in getting the children from West End to choir practice every Saturday for 17 weeks. He died before the concert, but God allowed him the opportunity to see the fruits of his labor when he saw the children perform at the ecumenical service on July 16. He was happy to serve his community. May his soul rest in peace. Madam President, just a few weeks ago, we were here debating the 2003-2004 budget. The budget was dubbed the security budget because it was crafted to promote and guide the nation's national development plan on three vital pillars: national security, economic security, and personal security. Madam President, after reading the Protection Against Violence bill, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that the bill we are debating today has been carefully thought out, due diligence was exercised, and widespread consultation with various stakeholders and social partners was sought, and their recommendations seriously considered and written into this game-changing piece of legislation. Madam President, this is no ordinary piece of legislation, by no sense of the imagination. Others may want the public to believe so. But the truth be told, and especially from those who can give testimonies of theirs or their loved ones' physical, social, economic, spiritual, and mental anguish, the abuse, brutality, assault, and death of loved ones as a result of violence, this piece of legislation is indeed a beacon of hope, a lighthouse of comfort and reassurance that they are no longer suffering alone, and their suffering has not gone in vain. Madam President, this government, I speak for those of us who sit on this side, and the people of this Bahamas fully understands that all Bahamians who suffer under the scourge of violence, lives matter. And this bill is a testament of a government who cares, who has compassion, a heart and a soul, a government who is committed to a safer and more peaceful society for all and sundry. Madam President, the Protection Against Violence Bill 2023 is a comprehensive legislation designed to provide protection and support for victims of violence in the Bahamas. The bill seeks to uphold the nation's commitment that we have signed on to as it relates to international conventions, such as the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, 1981, CEDAW, and the Inter-American Convention on the Prevention, Punishment, and Eradication of Violence Against Women, 1994, Convention Belém do Pará, Brazil. The bill is much more comprehensive than just that, though. In fact, the bill creates a domestic framework for supporting all victims in a dignified and confidential manner, handling complaints with the highest regard for the victim, and raising awareness by ongoing training, use of media, and the involvement with stakeholders and partners from all walks of life. At its very core, the bill effectively outlines the creation of a Protection Against Violence Commission and the Protection Against Violence Secretariat. These two bodies are designed to establish a comprehensive framework and the basic guidelines that will allow for accountability, reliability, and the smooth coordination with various stakeholders, NGOs, churches, civic groups, as well as the wider community for a holistic all-inclusive management approach to combating violence, as well as the sweeping impacts of violence, especially violence against women and girls. Additionally, these two bodies encourages grant funding and provides technical assistance for the sole purpose of strengthening the national response machinery as well as our national capacity to move in the direction where our country can eventually eradicate violence against all persons. Madam President, today is indeed about national security, economic security, and personal security. The aim is for all Bahamians to feel safe on our streets, at work, at play, and indeed in their homes. Madam President, let's take a quick look at the rights of victims outlined in the bill. The bill resolutely establishes that the rights of victims ought to be addressed by adhering to 4 basic principles. 1, compassion. 2, dignity. 3, confidentiality. And 4, privacy. Madam President, I wish to take time right here to congratulate the Minister of State of Social Services, the Minister and the Minister of State for Social Services and Urban Development, as well as the AG and their team of hard-working civil servants for the outstanding work they have done in preparing this landmark legislation. Madam President, continuing with the rights of victims, the bill prescribes sensitivity training for law enforcement and support personnel, and it includes a realistic provision for raising public awareness on the problems of and remedies for violence, and moreover, violence against women and girls. It establishes protocol for complaint handling by victims and details the procedures when violence results in death. Madam President, under the rights of victims, there is a comprehensive victim support mechanism providing instant safe housing for victims and their children. The bill also provides, within the human rights, within the victim's rights, a guarantee for legal support that will be needed to complete the victim's matter. That is from beginning to end. It also provides psychological assistance for victims and their children to address all forms of mental challenges that may result owing to the violence. Madam President, I'm talking about the right to medical assistance based on securing the victim's dignity and comfort. What do I mean by that? No longer will victims of violence have to stand on long lines in hospitals or clinics to be seen. This bill will ensure that there are specific doctors, nurses, police officers to deal with victims in the comfort of privacy, where confidentiality takes place. And so victims no longer have to fear standing online and people looking at them bruised and battered in lines of, and it ain't their business in hospitals. It includes facilitating access to safe spaces and communities. The bill also promises readjustment and training programs to help victims reintegrate into public, private, and social life. Madam President, this Protection Against Violence Bill 2023 is a true and living testament of the aquamarine, gold, and black dedication to creating a safer Bahamas. Today is a great day, colleagues, because Bahamians who have been suffering hopelessly from the scourges of violence, especially domestic violence, can finally, wholeheartedly join in the Jubilee celebration of our country. They understand, they appreciate, and they will testify that this is not just a check-the-box piece of legislation, as those opposite may want you to believe. It is a release. It is a release from the chains of feeling alone. It is a release from feeling trapped and imprisoned, feeling as no one cares. Well, today, I will stand on the side of those who care. Madam President, while I hear heartless call to send the bill back, I think of my daughters, granddaughters, my wife, my sisters, my niece. Madam President, this is too important. This bill is too important, man. And I can say this, there is a devil in hell who could persuade me to move backwards on this bill. It is forward, upward, onward, together we go. Madam President, Section 7 of the bill outlines that the minister, that's the Minister for Social Services, in consultation with the Commission, has the responsibility to strengthen our institutional capacity. Listen, I can say it again. Because some people say the minister don't have to consultate. Section 7 of the bill outlines that the minister, that's the Minister of Social Services, in consultation with the Commission, has the responsibility to strengthen our institutional capacity, and thus the bill makes it clear that social services, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Health and Wellness, and the Ministry of National Security, with special emphasis on the police, media, and civil society, all have a role to play in combating violence in our society and the holistic care for victims and their good quality of life. Madam President, I must address the call by members from the other side in the Honorable House of Assembly who were calling for this bill to be sent back to committee. And so, let me give you, Madam President, some reasons why we cannot go back. Miss Jackie Moxie, 2005. Miss Sandy Cartwright, 2010. Miss Onika Johnson, 2011. Teacher Miss Denise Adley, 2011. Miss Nellie Brown Cox, 2011. Miss Elike McKenzie, 2011. Miss Yvonne Adley, 2011. Miss Carol Jacques, 2011. Miss Courtney McKenzie, 2011. Miss Anthony Hunt, 2012. Miss Kathleen St. Brave, 2012. Chandra Newton, 2012. Tracy Roll, 2013. Miss Vera Antonique Berry and her 14-year-old daughter, Indiana Forbes, 2013. Miss Alex Smith, 2014. Miss Ariel Lowe, 2015. Miss Naoshi Yadley, 2015. Miss Latovia Vincent, 2015. Teacher, Miss Marcia Bowen, 2018. Miss Kavisha Richards, 2018. Miss Mona Davel, 2019. Miss Alicia Sawyer and her 8-year-old daughter, Elenique Wallace, 2020. Miss Jenny Florame, 2021. Miss Angeletta Pritchett, 2021. Miss Lakeisha Markey, 2021. Miss Heavenly Taveras, 2022. Miss Patrice Sawyer, 2022. Miss Allison Thompson and her 14-year-old daughter, Trevonique Thompson, 2023. Miss Yanka Strawn, 2023. And who can ever forget our precious darling, little Bella, my good friend. The headlines of November 11, 2021 was autopsy revealed 4-year-old young Bella was beaten to death with multiple broken bones. The story went on to say a woman and her boyfriend have been remanded in connection with the November 5th death of 4-year-old Devonia Walker, who was affectionately known as Bella. An autopsy has ruled that little Bella died from blunt force trauma to the body. In short, she was beaten to death. What about the beautiful Carissa Culmer? She visited this Senate, sat right over here.
That's right, that's right.
Listen, man, let's pay attention. Let's serious business.
Order, order, order.
Let's talk about Carissa Culmer, man. She sat right there. A few weeks later, she was found dead. And you know what she was found dead for? Because she gave up on the system. This bill is to show that victims never give up on the system again.
That's right.
Madam President, those are only some of the women who would have suffered death and violence between 2005 and 2023. Anyone who fails to support this bill, albeit it is not perfect, must first consider the victims and their families because their lives matter and has value. Madam President, in her presentation on the bill in the other place, Member of Parliament for Marathon and Minister of State for Social Services and Urban Development said that the chair of the Caribbean Women in Leadership, the Bahamas National Chapter, Ms. Charlene Paul, points to this view, and she quoted, "Women are being disrespected and violated at endemic levels, with the Bahamas leading the Caribbean in the rate of rape per capita, almost 9 times the world's average. And the effects of such acts on our homes, our children, our communities, our healthcare and welfare system, we can no longer afford to turn a blind eye to the violence against women in any place where it exists. And today we fully accept that position and have decided that as a nation, we are going to go much further by saying we can no longer afford to turn a blind eye against anyone. Madam President, this bill demonstrates the government's commitment to empowering, protecting, and supporting victims of violence. And through this bill, the government is taking decisive action to ensure that safety and dignity of every Bahamian citizen exists. This bill also ensures that all victims of violence can access and receive the support and help they need. Madam President, the Minister of Social Services and Urban Development have been hard at work for some time now, strengthening the ministry's efficiencies and overall capacities that are required to meet the demands associated with the smooth rollout of this bill. One, the minister has established for the first time in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas the Office of the Minors Advocate to provide minors with access to a special attorney who can advocate on their behalf on all their matters. The minister, for the first time, has established a fully operational legal division within social services. This team, made up of lawyers and former senior police officers, will be responsible for ensuring that matters get to court in a timely manner. Madam President, the police can't do it all alone. Number 3, the ministry has completed the final draft of a national gender equality policy. This policy represents some of the heavy lifting that has already begun regarding policies processes and guidelines relating to the functionalities of the commission, among other things. Number 4, the ministry has been securing safe homes and expanding the management of the children home, and that is important. The minister understands that if one simply looks even from a second-hand perspective, the facts are children are always caught amidst victims of violence, and the negative impact of violence, crime, murder, abuse, especially of our parents, whether random or domestic, sometimes result in children being forced to live and grow up in children's homes. And so we have to ensure that all the help that is needed to properly raise these children are readily available. The ministry has established the men's desk, the family island counseling boards. All of these boards and different programs are there to undergird and support this bill and ensure that it is rolled out properly and there is enough support for everyone. In closing, some are asking the question, why this protection against violence bill and not a gender-based violence bill? Well, in addition to accepting the Honorable Prime Minister's most reasonable explanation that he gave in the Honorable House of Assembly, allow me to take this opportunity to remind you of some horrific incidents involving male adolescents. In 2003, a monstrous evil walked amongst the rest of the peaceful population on the island of Grand Bahama. It hid itself well behind a man who was a father, an artist, an exemplary employee, and even a practicing churchgoer. The monster hid in plain sight as he snatched life away from the innocent. Voice boy, Marcus Carlos, was 11-year-old and a 6th grader at Lewis Yard Primary when he disappeared. Then D'Angelo McKenzie, a 13-year-old 8th grader at Jack Hayward High, vanished 11 days later. 2 months after that, 11-year-old Junior Remy, a 5th grade student of Freeport Primary, went missing on July 29th. Then on September 28th, Desmond Roll, a 14-year-old 9th grade student of St. George's High, went missing after he left his part-time job that fateful Sunday morning. 5-time convicted killer, Cordell Farrington, was handed down 4 life sentences on October 1st, 2010 by a New Providence judge for the 2003 murders. Jay Grant, who makes the 5th child of the group of friends who went missing, body was never found. Madam President, the boys had all attended government school, were bag packers, I repeat. They were bag packers, man, not drug pushers. Bag packers at a local grocery store. They frequent the same game room downtown and live in close proximity of each other, except for one. They were all good, decent, honest, hard-working young men with positive futures. They lost their life to violence. Jamal Robbins, age 22, body was found in the closet of the murderer of the 5 boys, with his body mutilated. Madam President, who could forget 11-year-old Marco, his horrific abduction and senseless murder in September of 2011 turned the stomach of the entire nation. These violence, Madam President, were perpetrated on all males. I repeat, Madam President, these violence were perpetrated on all males. Madam President, these young males' lives matter. Their family lives matter. Madam President, I say with no apologies, this is no time for cherry picking. Today is a call to action and not a call for protest. Today is a call for unity and not a call for political football.
That's right.
The scoreboard should all be turned off because this is not the time or kind of bill to score brownie points. Rather, this bill is designed to mend lives, restore dignity, and give all victims, not some, all victims, a fighting chance to live a normal life. Madam President, I say this, the nation is dependent on us to do the right thing. The bill may not be perfect, but it is an important giant step in the right direction. The Protection Against Violence bill must see us working together across party lines to ensure a successful implementation. I've known the minister for more than 30 years. That's the Minister of Social Services. He has always had an open door policy. Everyone can feel free to share their views. So does the AG. Your opinion matters.
That's right.
Madam President,
Consultation.
we owe a great thank you to those churches and NGOs such as Zonta, Women United, FOAM, Links, as well as the other groups who have been holding the reins and providing support services to victims over the years. This is now our time to step up to the plate, hold the reins, and do the right thing. Madam President, this undertaking is no marathon. Excuse me, this undertaking is a marathon, not a sprint. There's much work to do, and we need all hands on deck. And together, we can make the Bahamas a safer place for everyone. And if we all, as a nation, join hands, join hearts, and just try to show a little love, God, who has begun this great work in us, will bring it to completion through Christ Jesus our Lord. Madam President, I support this bill.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Kirkland Russell of Grand Bahama. I had to include the of Grand Bahama in the end for your contribution. As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Tyrell Young.
Good afternoon, Madam President. Good afternoon, colleagues. And Madam President, I stand today in support of this great bill in a time where it's truly necessary, Madam President. There have been many talk and less action. It's been a long time coming, but the day is now. Madam President, in the words of Kofi Annan, and I quote, "Violence against women is perhaps the most shameful human rights violation and is perhaps the most pervasive. It knows no boundaries of geography, culture, wealth, or anything of the sort. As long as it continues, Madam President, we cannot claim to be making real progress towards equality, development, and peace." Madam President, with that being said, this bill is not based on one particular gender. This bill covers all genders. So, Madam President, the bickering back and forward from the opposition in reference to gender-based violence bill. This bill was crafted in a way to cover everyone against violence. Madam President, today, as we seek to have this bill passed, I wish to say thank you to all the women across the Bahamas who have fought for so long against violence against women, such as Sandra Dane Patterson, Dame Doris Johnson, Dame Ivy Dumont, Dame Janet Boswick, Cynthia Mother Pratt, Miss Candy Gibson, and our nation's First Lady, Mrs. Anne Marie Davis, and all other women who have gone above and beyond to protest, to fight for the rights of women, men, children, and also the elder. I applaud you for taking a stand and not giving up. You are heroes in our nation. Madam President, here in the Bahamas, violence has become one of the day-to-day topics as you hear about it happening on a day-to-day basis. It's in our homes, it's in our schools, it's in our workplaces, it's everywhere, Madam President. We as Bahamians must take a stand. We must fight the positive fight to find ways to resolve issues that we may have against each other. Our children are becoming victims as they are not resolving problems in the way that they should, but resorting to violence, and as such, a result, we are losing so many of our young men senselessly, Madam President. We must take action, and we must take action now. Madam President, the Protection Against Violence Bill 2023 seeks to do just that. As it states, this bill proposes the creation of a Protection Against Violence Commission and a secretariat. Also prescribes sensitivity training for law enforcement and support personnel for raising public awareness on the problems and remedies for violence against individuals. Madam President, this bill seeks to safeguard the rights of all victims of violence, in particular women. We know, Madam President, that this bill is not, like I said earlier, a gender-based bill. But we know in most societies, women bear the brunt of not only domestic violence, but all sorts of violence. So this bill in particular will be a support mechanism for women in particular. This bill will ensure that they are treated with dignity and compassion and in privacy, like we all spoke about today, Madam President. We must remember that it is not easy for victims to come forward, and when they do, they should be treated fairly and they should be given help. Victims must be treated with compassion and respect for their dignity. Madam President, they should be entitled to access the mechanisms of justice and to prompt redress for the harm that they have suffered. Madam President, more support should be given to victims, and this bill seeks to do just that. We must take a stand, and Madam President, the time is now. Like the AG said earlier, I think it was the AG who said, there's been long talk, but no action. But the time is now for action. And this New Day government is doing just that, making sure that the victims of crime, of violence in particular, have some sort of mechanism in law, in writing, to support their claims, and that they could have to justify whatever remedies that can be put in place and taken before the courts to support them. Madam President, the safety of all Bahamians should be our number one goal, as we should want the best for our fellow men, women, and children. Thus, We must ensure that we do all that we can to ensure that victims of violence are heard and all is done to assist and to protect them. Yes, we must all be committed to the safety and well-being of all our Bahamian people. We must continue to fight and eradicate violence by taking a stand, spreading the word that violence will not be tolerated in our land, and taking back the power. Madam President, this bill supports services for victims, rights of victims, the establishment of non-profit foundation, the creation of a Protection Against Violence Commission, specialized for services for victims, and the promotion of education and training. These are all needed. These are all needed to help and to assist victims of violence. Madam President, I recall when the days were we were our brother's keeper. When there was a fear to do wrong, because you knew there were punishments for your actions. We as parents must continue to lead by example and instill in our children from right from wrong. We must take a stand and refuse to be silent. Let your voice be heard, Madam President. This bill, indeed, is an important step forward, but we all need to be on one accord and work together to make this happen. Today, I stand in this great place in support of this bill. As for too long, violence has plagued our country and so little has been done. This bill is protection for all Bahamians, not one particular group, but all Bahamians, Madam President, who have suffered in some way. Let us all turn the pain into power. Yes, we can. Yes, we will. We will stop the violence, Madam President. If we stand together and unite, we can all create a positive change in our Bahama land. Madam President, before I end my contribution, I'd just like to know a few things. First of all, I heard the good senator earlier said that this bill is supposed to or perceived to be the same bill as the gender-based violence bill, right? This bill was never intended to be the same bill. This bill was created as an individual bill, not as a bill that was supposed to be carried on from the previous bill. Now, some aspects of the bill might have been taken out, some might have been retracted, but it was all in the matter of progress to make sure that the bill is a comprehensive bill that will really and truly hold weight when being used and when being enacted. Number two, Madam President, why is it opposition continues to argue against this bill, when they sat with this bill on their tables for 4.5 years and never brought it up? Where were your voices then? You had the opportunity to do it. So why is it now that is so much pushback when the bill comes forward? Are we truly for Bahamians? Number three, and this question also goes to the opposition. I ask you to give one example, and the AG continued to ask this question repeatedly today. Give one example why you don't support this bill. Why is it? What is the question around the gender-based violence bill versus this bill? Name one example that this doesn't cover any particular individual in our country. You can't give an example. This bill covers all genders, point blank. Madam President, what we actually should be focused on is crafting new ways in which we can change the culture of our nation when it relates to violence and conflict resolutions. That is where the core of the issue is, and that is where our focus should be. As a united front, as a government, we should be all focused on how do we create initiatives to create change in our culture in order to support this bill. And this bill right here will eventually be used very minimally if we was to change the culture of our nation. But it starts, like I said, in the home with the parents like myself. Like our good Senator James Turner said earlier, it starts from us as parents. We have to ensure that we instill in our kids as best as we possibly can, that we teach them how to resolve issues without resorting to violence. I would also leave, Madam President, on one note to our royal opposition senators. With a word from the wise, I would sit small until your name is called. I support this bill, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Tyrell Young, for your contribution. As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Reuben Ramming.
Thank you, Madam President. I thought it unfortunate that Senator Terrell caused my mind to drift on other things when he raised the issue of the bill being neglected. I guess that is true in its substance, but the tone of it was as a proof that we ain't serious. You know, I could come back and ask where was our voices. I could stand up here and say, where is your voices when a woman claiming rape made allegations? Where is your voices? I could say that. I was hoping we just stay away from the petty. I can go back as far as when the member of parliament for the NPLP stood in the House Assembly and said about him when he don't beat his girlfriend, that she considered it as her not being loved. And that was in 2014, and as a result of that, he apologized and everything else about that. And my thing is, every time I look at that video, even recently, you'd be surprised to see how many faces in the gallery was laughing when he made that statement, until the crisis center caused him to rebuke him over that. And I think as a part of his actions, he also donated something towards the crisis center. Let me show you this. All of us, Madam President, Madam Presidents, have problems and coulda, woulda, shoulda. In a matter like this, sometimes it's best to stay in the present and try to perfect something that I think at the least the opposition is saying it is a good start, but there are people complaining on the outside. Because this is very, 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 very critical across the board. When we look at these things, Madam President, and I'm going to say, as I always do, what I believe. I think for reasons that I would justify, but since the AG is here, let me come back to that. And I want to raise a point I think is very important. In our previous debate, through you, Madam President, when you jumped on that concern as relate to licenses and stuff, I've obligated, because I was surprised at how many calls I got. I think nobody watches the Senate. I mean, I'm talking on a Sunday, strangers calling, up until today. And if you ever hear a grown man cry, and I told him I'll raise it with you, a number of them were men in heavy equipment business. And some of them say, you know, we have an old truck, so when the truck broke down, it takes long to get parts. And since that was my primary source of income, I had to get another job. So it took them one guy said it took him 7 years to get his truck roadworthy again. And when he went to road traffic, they said, no, we don't take no mechanic, nothing, no whatever else. $12,000. He said, man, he tell them, what you want me to do? Give my truck to somebody else for them to come and get it licensed, or sell my truck for them to get it licensed? I mean, it is actually a sin, because so the licensing is to collect road tax for the use of the road, et cetera, et cetera. And now we tax tires and everything else in advance and different type things. I mean, it's actually a sin when somebody is not utilizing the road to still be obligated to pay a tax for something they had absolutely no use for, which is in the exact same vein of the act that we debated and that. And I told him I'll raise that with you. Yeah, I know. But I tell him I'll raise it with you in any event. So you can somewhat should look at that. There's a very, I think there was one time when if you could show proof that the vehicle was off the road, there would have been some sort of consideration. They were saying, I'm just saying I'm reporting to them as I do. But I want to move back to that. I'm just completing that because I promised him I would speak to you about it, because a lot of them was upset. Madam President, as the bill is in and of itself, I don't lodge much complaints, you know. I see the effort to be thorough. I see the effort to be tidy. I'm glad when the AG explained that, please, this ain't the time, man. This is some serious stuff here. See, I gave everybody their thing. Come on, man. I don't tell you, when we talk about fundamental things that cut to the fabric of our country, let's put that stuff down, man. As the AG would have explained that any other gender component will rise in a subsequent bill, correct? Something that will come forward to be dealt with later on. I think I got you right when you were speaking about that. Something else is coming.
Oh, that was on the protected rules.
Yes. And because I get concerned, and I'm going to quote the Prime Minister. I took note of something he said, and it's in the Hansard, somewhat 4 minutes into his closing argument. Because I think what he said justified the point, and what he said also justified some of my concerns. He started to say, if we are keeping with the time, good point, and if we are recognizing this term, gender-based violence, it has shifting perspective. There is a move away from the term gender-based violence. It is, in fact, to deal this meaning the bill is specifically to deal with violence against women. The original definition for gender violence at that time when he quoted the 1993-1994 Amendment to Human Rights, he was saying dealt specifically with violence. Now we have seen from there a drastic shift in the definition of what gender violence is, or what even gender is, which raises a serious problem that we need to totally ventilate in the Bahamian populace if we were to adopt what now is wrapped up in the current word gender and applied today. Very much so. I think in this bill, maybe I might have seen once even the word gender. I think I might have seen it once. There's definitely no definition here. But we as a country may really have to.
Look at the definition of gender or gender.
Yeah. Has.
That's in 2016.
Yeah. I know the two. You know, I didn't say where I'm at. And I don't care who don't like it, I say where I'm at. Because I got to live with whatever I got to live with. You see what I'm saying? Because we need to be careful how we lose who we are, our cultural, religious identity, based upon, quite frankly, the rampant, loose foolishness that is going on there in the world. Now, I've deliberately asked in several debates, not out of mischief, but out of sheer concern, as to is this government under any pressure from any other country to impose on the Bahamas, like they're doing in other Caribbean jurisdiction, anything that will go against our social norms of the majority in this country. Because this would be a whole different story as far as I'm concerned if that was all tied up in here. And that's why when the Prime Minister, and I listened carefully, and you can listen to it twice, used the word, when he said, as related to women, and I expected him to say men, he's saying other gender groups. I was like, hold on, bro, now you ain't trying to sleep something in here, eh? And I'm saying that, man, self-respect, please, self-respect. And I say that because I am keenly aware of it, and I, as I normally do in my quest to be as accurate as possible, even asked the Attorney General, expressed my concern, and he gave me a version that I think is reasonable. I'm talking about my communication reference to what the Prime Minister said on his feet in the House. And the Prime Minister and the Attorney General assured me as it relates to his take on what I just said, and I consider it, okay, reasonable. But I'm on the alert. I'm on the alert for these kinds of things. I believe that there is two genders. And in those two genders, everybody else fits. If you want to be a trans man, then you're in the main category. You're a trans woman, you can be whatever you want. People of disability are disabled females or disabled males. And I want to be very, very cautious. And I even recommend to the point that if we ever get to that point, put it to the Bahamian people for a referendum if we're going to make any other changes or any other variants in that regard. I'm not implying, and if you would have noticed from the mature people in the group, or imputing anything on our government. I am stating an obvious fact of we know pressures are bearing on us. We just debated over and repeatedly to the point that even Senator Pistor cried on his feet, and I say that respectfully because he understood the gravity of us being taken advantage of by the European Union in this blacklisting, which I have expressed numerous times to his chagrin. But I was glad that he got to the point that he saw what grieves me about these people who pressure us to do things. So I'm simply saying and reaffirming that when we do get to that point, if we ever do get to that point, let's have a clean, open public discourse and let these matters go to referendum. I believe that the bill, as it relates to male and female, properly addresses the categories, and in that there are many subcategories, because there can be a female child, there could be a male child, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When I also look at this bill, and let me move to another point, the point of consultation. From Sir Lyndon to now, governments have been lousy on consultation. And personally, I'd recommend to the government to create a public document that outlines what our form of consultation would be to satisfy. You know why? Let me give you an example. In this Senate, Madam President, as you well know, there are supposed to be 3 independent senators. They are appointed by the Governor General after consultation, being advised by the Prime Minister, under consultation, after consultation. Listen, man, why don't do you?
Reminding you to choose an independent senator.
Sit. Listen, let me finish. And it is supposed to be done in consultation with the leader of the opposition. You know what consultation is? From there to now, Prime Minister Rubin, I'm not Nabucco, so Prime Minister Rubin called opposition leader, Attorney General Ryan.
Madam President.
I'm going to be appointing.
Stand on the point of order.
Yes, Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Tyrell Young.
Madam President, I'd like to find out from Senator Raming what's the relevance of Senator's appointment to the bill that's being debated today.
Thank you, Senator Raming. I'm sorry. Thank you, Senator Terrell Young. Senator Raming,
I'm talking about consultation, and this is the example of government consultation rather public consultation. All right?
so wait.
So I forgive you for your inquiry because
Senator Raming, can you repeat what you just said regarding relevance, please?
I am on the point of relevance. If they show the same courtesy I did my best to do through all of their debates.
Okay.
Because I regard this as sacred.
Senator Raming, speak to the chair. Speak to the chair, please,
And the
Senator Raming.
example would have been, and this is what has been happening straight through, and I said what I said again, from Sir Lyndon to now, and they are supposed to be independent senators. You see what I'm saying? And so the conversation, as I've spoken to other leaders before, would be, okay, Ruben the Prime Minister will call opposition leader Ryan Pinder. So, okay, listen here, I got 3 guys for senators. One is Terrell, one is Russell, one is Alcides. We good? We good. Boom. Governor General, my name. That is deemed consultation.
I remember that.
You see what I'm saying? That can't work with the public sector. That's what I'm saying. When we are going out to the wider body, whatever it is, there must be a more broader one to their level and respecting them. You know why I don't get too deep into it except expressing the fact that, listen here, they say when 2 people disagree, either 1 or 2 confused or 1 or 2 lying. To avoid getting into that, we need to say, as right now, the Christian Council is now saying something, the other people saying something. Our Honorable Attorney General has been standing on his point of his level of consultation. So we can get from beyond this, because we've seen in our cycle so many times, as Senator Maxine would have expressed, with the Chamber of Commerce and many other entities struggling for things, they keep saying the same thing. Let's come to some understanding, listen to what level of consultation this is. All right? So we all know once we cross this threshold, we don't owe you any more debate. There just need to be some understanding, because dealing with each other in the Constitution about governmental things and appointment is quite different from dealing with those same persons out there who represents the citizenry to whom we serve. So I'm just saying, find a way. So the next time something is done, it is a bit more crystal clear who's lying in the room or who's misleading in the room, or that we have met the benchmark for reasonable consultation. And I consider that to be reasonable. Because I personally get tired of hearing it over and over and over and over again. What I'm also concerned about, Madam President, in this bill, in the definition, is that I can appreciate what I see is trying to be captured here. And I can appreciate the level of comprehensiveness and thoroughness that is being brought here. And I think for the men in society, in reading this, one of the greatest concern of men in society is that, at least so far in this bill, meaning that this would have been the first bill along the progress of protection of women sexually, that it does not create what is an appearance of a trap to men. Because as much as I'm willing to die for the women in my life, my wife, my mother and mother-in-law, my sister and sisters-in-law, my daughters, I don't want to jack up myself trying to be the knight on shining armor as well. Just as you saw in my reference earlier to the accused, and you see my limitations, it's because I clearly understand until things are adjudicated, you seldom know where everything lies. So be reserved, lest you have to say sorry. Now, the only thing I request is, as this bill is working on, is speed of justice and respect for the process, so that there is equality in terms of the approach and the strength and the gravity in which law enforcement go to investigate and do anything. But we need to be careful, because I look at everybody and say, but it may be his day, but what if it's mine? And I can rest assured if an accusation come against me, that got to be a setup. Because if nobody know me, I know me. But I'm glad that in this venture into the process of addressing violence inclusive of women, I don't see traps or ambiguities that can cause men to rightfully feel concerned that, you know, you're overdoing it on that part, and if a woman get vexed at me, she could use this to set me up. See, this is the upper house here. When things are being ventilated to its teeth in the border, in the lower house, and even somewhere in here, the purpose of senior statesmen is to try find a wider perspective on the effectiveness of what is going on, rather than regurgitating the same thing over and over and over again. And so for that, and I'm pretty sure, in the eyes of many men, that's reassuring to actually hear. Now, there is something else that I am concerned about that I would think I'll make as a recommendation. But I also commend, while I'm at it, the Attorney General and the step of the government, notwithstanding that consultative debacle, to have publicly acknowledged the willingness to keep this document living for the hearing and venting of anyone else who is concerned. And I'm glad of that, and I hope that speaks to the persons who have concern that there is still an avenue. All right? But what I'm concerned about, Madam President, is when we look in the definition. And first, let me establish that I don't think the definition in itself is wrong. But the definition in itself speaks to me about a wider concern. And see, some people always think everything is just political, brother. I gotta tell people, you know, I want to be guided as factually as possible. And so I even vented past the AG and his thoughts about it so he could feel my heart and the intent. Because when we look at the economic and financial abuses, and for people who don't understand, that is equivalent to holding a gun on somebody. I've stand up in this house before to the chagrin of some of the same persons like Senator Pistok, jeering at me, not allowing me to properly ventilate, when I spoke about how young ladies were taken advantage of for a job. See, someone's big enough to say, man, we'll go there and sell peanut, baby, ain't got to do, but you don't know how everybody else is situated. I spoke and I stood up here, and I know some people thought that was a contradiction when I said there are good women out there selling their bodies to feed their children. Some people say, what you mean good women feeding their bodies? I say, but you're all stay right there. You think everybody out there doing something that you may consider beneath you is necessary? The necessity of a situation sometimes, and that's why it's a type of extortion and blackmail. That's why I am so glad that this is expressed in here. Because it's real. It's real. Not just in husband and wives and other different type things. And then they hold you hostage. But when they begin to speak about this, and I won't read it all, I will give it as an example. This Prevention Against Violence bill is dealing with the most precious thing that exists. And that is life and quality of life. This isn't just like insurance, you know, or motor theft, where they steal your car out of the garage and they catch him and put him in jail, and even if the car is found stripped or whatever else, he's in jail. Okay, that's a good penalty, I get insurance. This is you literally wrecking the life of somebody who, while you go to jail, this person is still living this. I would like to see consideration, if there is not now, consideration for a few things. And I would give it as an example. Right now, even now, there are persons living from paycheck to paycheck. They don't have control over their bills, but they're able to hold back the tithe because they're still able to make that payment. They may be on their third 2 times missing the mortgage, but they're keeping the last one before it go into 90 days. They're paying it. Then you go ahead and that person is sexually molested or raped and send them into a tailspin that makes them even unable to work properly, function properly. You didn't just disrupt that woman's body or that man's body, because right now, just recently, males were gang raped in this country. And you smiling. You need to know when to smile and to piss off. Men are being gang raped. The Honorable Cynthia Mother Pratt was here. And when I raised the fact in this House, to the chagrin of some of the same people over there again, Madam President, about how when she was Minister of National Security, she produced a report about how our children were sexualized from as early as primary school. Sexualized. And I said, even my boys, and all the news here was even our boys. Our junior, senior high students, they use sexual experience by the word body count, Madam President. Some of them in high school have a higher body count than somebody 3 times their age. Some countries manage the content because it's the thinking, the things that we've been exposed to, that whereas certain things like TikTok and other things, where some of the content are able to be blocked from coming into certain regions or to certain children, but children have so much access that they've been sexualized. I think many of us, even now, we think back to our days of school, you know, the time when they used to drive them Laurel and Mustang and thing. You can remember the grown men picking up the girls. This is a very serious problem. But back to what my concern is. So now you disrupt a lady life. What if she becomes pregnant as a result of that rape? And because of religious belief, she has to settle herself to bring that child to life. Now she have another mouth to feed that came as a result of something that was, it is what it is, rape. And this person's life has been upended. I'm talking about depression, suicide, low self-esteem, things that could cause a person who would have been a star employee on the job to be walking around like a church mouse, barely functional. What can there be in the law in cases like that to help fortify cases like that through the Labor Act or something? And the main point I wanted to make out of that, what do we do as a relation with them to the matter of restorative justice? Because this in your car, you just get right off, say, I didn't rape you, go claim on your insurance for that. And this is not an easy thing, Madam President, because a man or a woman or a person who went through that kind of trauma, trust me, the last thing they many times thinking about is anything but that. But sometimes as lawmakers, like good parents, you must put things in place that even though in the moment they may be too shaken to consider it, but this is something they're going to need down the road. I believe just like the proceeds of drugs, you get caught with drugs and everything else, they take your car, they take your house, they take everything, and then they use that and convert that into whatever else, they'll finish the drug fight. You know, most of these fellas, they go pay the thing, but you know what they like more? Their little Honda. You know what? You go rape that gal, that Honda getting sell. There should be something whereas the woman have a time for consideration. And something else kicked in. If you find out that there's a child as a result with that, a trust form is set up, and that man wages after jail and whatever should be garnished. What he has in his name we should consider liquidating and then putting in escrow somewhere or in a trust fund. So that even if mama at that time just can't even dream of seeing that man, you can imagine the child look like the man. 18 years down the road, there's a difference. You still have a child that's been disenfranchised. We need to consider some sort of restorative justice in this situation as well. Because in many instances, it's not good enough just to go. And in many instances, it ain't just a little fellow on the street who only get 10 cents, you know. Sometimes be these fellows who get them huge things, and there have been people who have lost their jobs, their homes, and everything else because of a situation like that. So what that did, that's a double jeopardy of crime. You got raped. Now you got financially almost excommunicated, alienated, and stripped, raped again financially. Your dreams set aside. So as I'm saying, I'm not condemning this. I am pleased that this bill actually acknowledges and appreciates the fact that economic and financial abuse is a part of this, but also that is something that we need to consider in interest. I mean, we need to look at people through our eyes, man. And we need to look down the road for people. And if the person never wants to take advantage of what had been set aside in escrow, and there will be a procedure for that, just like we have for the dormant account at central bank. After a certain period of time, that money goes back to the government and is used for certain things. Well, if they don't decide at a certain time, which I'll hope will be after the child is 18 and have a chance to say whether I want it or not, even if mommy don't want it, then it goes to the commission to help other people who are subject to this kind of thing. These guys got to know that you ain't just going up there to come out with some tattoo on your eye and say I get stripes for raping and come out in society, some big man among the gang. You're going to pay through your teeth. Because it sickens me when I see persons go and murder other people's children and steal and destroy, and then they go before the judge and say, Your Honor, well, I got 2 children and a sick mother. What do you think about the man you just killed? What do you think about the family you just snatched the breadwinner away from? We need to cause our people to think hard before they do these kinds of foolishness, Madam President. This is absolutely not a game. I think there's one other point, 2 other points, and again, arising out of the definition, as relating to the definition of a child. Again, I make no complaint about the definition, and I believe in every act, although we do put definition in the act, these definitions, interpretations are very important, especially when we reach to anything talking about gender. I want to see in bold letters what you mean by that word. Because one time ago, me and Senator Pickstock could be on Montague having a gay time. You say that now, that's a whole different game. Because we're having a merry, good, positive time. Gay means happy.
Madam President.
Gay means happy. But then if you say that now,
Excuse me.
the word is different.
Madam President, I stand on a point of clarification.
The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Darren Pickstock.
Please, may you please have Senator Rumming remove his statement. I don't want to have a gay time with him. I don't want to be mixed up in that.
Thank you, Senator Pickstock.
Out of respect for
That could be-
Senator Pickstock,
that could be misinterpreted.
Draw the word Senator Pickstock.
Right?
I withdraw the word Senator Pickstock.
In the name of Jesus. Move that.
Hey, it reminds me of the movie The Blues Brothers when these guys keep running into a club called the Blue Oyster. And then they hear that music, ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. But the thing about it, Madam President, as a man, I could be wrong anybody, and when I come back out, I'm still Reuben. But it was not even disparaging, that's why my name was included in it. I did not say you and Senator Tyrell, then you could say that was something, but I said me. I said that because that is one of the most common and perfect words to show how our English language isn't what it meant. A gay time was the same as saying a merry time, a fun time. Boy, you use that word now, that's a whole different meaning. So definitely know whenever we come with anything and that word is mentioned, I want to see the definition. As it relates to the one with the child, like I said, I take no issue with the definition in itself, but this is something I'm asking and also will take advice of it because I know that in our various law, they have different categories of age as relate to consent and different type things and so on and so forth, and in the laws that we would have already passed in there to ensure that there's no ambiguities in between. The reason why is I don't want some smart lawyer. Yeah.
You want the first to raise this issue.
So I don't want some smart lawyer who have a client who got caught in the very act of molesting or harming a young boy or girl under the age of 18, and just because the child is 16, he used that as an escape clause to get either a lighter term or off the hook because 16 was the age of consent. My rape is rape. Because even though it was rape, he'll turn it into something consensual to try and minimize the fact. So if the lower age in our spectrum speaks to 16, then let's make sure that the intent, especially of consent, is captured in any debate relative to rape. Finally, Madam President, as relate to the minister's responsibility and the commission in itself joint, and it's under the function 11 of the commission, section D, to liaise with the minister to ensure that there are an adequate number of shelters available for victims throughout the islands. I know that's a very hard task. We are archipelagic. And it's not even a hard time just in terms of facilities, it's a hard time just because of security. Because in the very nature in some islands, that must become what the Bible called a city of refuge. You know, you're staying there but don't come out. Because everybody will know you're there. But nevertheless, it's still needed. Why I'm saying this is one of those things that I would hope, should there be a supplementary budget coming up or any kind, or maybe by the midterm budget, that the government will be able to put their money where their mouth is, to be able to help lead the cause. Why are you tempting me to say I am predicting that money y'all yield back to the cruise ship that costs us 6 months worth of revenue may cost y'all have to borrow some more. But let's leave that there. Anyway, the thing about it is, I would like to see the government, especially after listening to the strength of their expressions in the House and even here, for this signature bill, that they put their money where their mouth is and ensure that if only the first proper shelter is constructed for women suffering as a result of violence and rape, and finance that. And at the least, maybe I know of people like Bishop Walter Hanchel, I think he may already have the land for these kind of things. Find a way to partner and get him over the top with that to be able to generate that funds. That will go a long way to ensuring that people don't see this as just clever politics and lip service, which I can see from the majority of people here in this House, that they take this downright seriously. And I commend all the senators who express that level of seriousness and compassion about that. So I would hope that the government would, because in this past budget, the government had allotted $500,000, which we all agree ain't nothing. It's a token. You know, if they had to buy the land alone, that's it, you get vacant land. If they have crown land, $500 ain't nothing. You could buy a triplex for $500,000. But I would like to see the government put the money where their mouth is. And the final point is, we have had many NGOs that have been performing well. And I'm sure when this bill comes to life, that there will be probably some more popping up. Because of that, I would like the government through the Ministry of Social Service, if they have not done it as yet, because I'm not aware of it, to begin a level of certification for persons who have been functioning in these capacities as well. All right? We've had many of them who we certify and be endorsed, not just to, we see some of them get monies in the budget and stuff, but I mean a professional certification and set a standard for everyone else who want to join the bandwagon to be able to see and aspire to in that regard. And then you'll probably see that can help people like, we all spoke about Candy Gibson and Walter Hanschel and those who have been around a long time, to be able to leverage even more to help them do the things that is supporting our overall agenda for the protection of victims in our society. So if we do consider that, I believe it will go a very, very long way. And with those thoughts, Madam President, I don't think I have any other concerns in that regard. Yeah, with that report, with that, I rest, Madam President, and thank you.
Thank you, Senator Reuben Ramming, for your contribution. As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Quinton Lightburn.
Right. Madam President, I thank you for allowing me to contribute this afternoon on this groundbreaking bill. But before I proceed, I would like to express my sincere condolences to the family of my friend and fraternity brother, Mr. Jerome Dorset. He passed away on Saturday, July 29th. This young 33-year-old man battled through many medical complications for about 3 years. He was an avid junkanoo and a member of the Saxons Brass. And I would like to say to my fraternity brother and his family, your legacy will live on, Brother Jerome, and I will ensure that you are not forgotten. Today, I stand before you to debate the Protection Against Violence Bill 2023. I speak to you today as a senator, but I always speak to the Bahamian people as a man, as an older brother, and as a son, and someone that will always stand up for all Bahamians, no matter your gender or creed. This bill addresses a pressing issue that continues to plague our society, and it includes gender-based violence. It is a deeply concerning and pervasive problem that affects individuals across the globe, regardless of race, age, socioeconomic status, and many others. And in the Bahamas, there is no exception. Gender-based violence takes many forms, including physical, emotional, sexual, and psychological abuse, all of which have devastating consequences for its victims. Today, as we debate the contents of this bill, what we have before us is a culmination of decades of advocacy, community work, activism and research, and systematic change that has allowed us to arrive at this point today. We are standing on the shoulders of those who have worked and stood in the gap without ceremony, without proper recognition, and often without adequate compensation for the volume of work that they do each and every day. They are the real national heroes, Madam President. We cannot deny that women in particular bear the brunt of this violence. They experience harassment, assault, and discrimination solely based on their gender. This is a violation of their basic human rights and an insult to the principles of equality and dignity that should define our society. It is essential for us to recognize that gender-based violence is not a private matter. It is a societal problem that requires collective action. This government is breaking the silence surrounding this issue and creating an environment where survivors feel safe to come forward and seek support and help with confidentiality. As a community, we must actively challenge harmful gender norms and stereotypes that perpetuate violence and inequality. Education plays a crucial role in addressing gender-based violence. This bill will promote gender equality from an early age and help teach respect and empathy. We can foster a future generation that rejects violence and embraces mutual respect. This bill will promote the education and training of those involved in the administration of justice, police, and other law enforcement officers, as well as other personnel responsible for the implementation of policies for the prevention, punishment, and eradication of violence against women. It is equally important to engage men and boys in this conversation because we play a vital role in promoting a culture of nonviolence and respect. This bill will make way for A, a safe house or shelter for victims and accompanying children, B, psychological, medical, and legal assistance, C, access to safe spaces and community, and D, readjustment and training programs to enable victims of sexual abuse to readjust and fully participate in public, private, and social life. Institutional support and access to resources are critical components to combating gender-based violence. We must ensure that survivors have access to all things I just mentioned, including legal aid and medical assistance. This bill is not about imposing unnecessary bureaucracy or toothless policies onto existing structures. The focus is on acting and coordinating efforts, standardizing and enforcing standards, and providing targeted support to protect and uplift victims and survivors. In 2022, 10 women were murdered in our country, and more than 4 of those were related to gender-based violence. I know the side opposite in this place has repeatedly asked for this bill, and this government has answered the call not for them, but for the Bahamian people.
They wouldn't do it for themselves.
We answered the call for the disenfranchised, the overlooked, and the voiceless people in our society. That is who we are looking out for.
Yes, yes.
But let me take a walk down memory lane.
Yes, Senator Lightboard.
Some of our senators in here were members of that other place from 2017 to 2021. And the gender-based violence bill was completed in 2016 under the previous PLP administration. It was a 72-page document, Madam President, but there was a change in government in 2017, and for 4.5 years, the now opposition did not bring it to Parliament.
Not only that, they didn't do any work on the bill. It was a competent authority that they didn't do any work on the one-man bond.
Senator Attorney General, they did the same old political tactics of stop, review, and cancel, even at the expense of Bahamians. As always, this government, will stand for the voiceless. We will stand for the voiceless, for Rochelle the Woodside, who was last seen on August 11, 2022. The disenfranchised, like Candice Pearl Smith, who was murdered on January 18, 2021. And Allison Thompson and a 14-year-old daughter, Trevanique Thompson, who was murdered earlier this year. More must be done to protect our women. And this piece of legislation is a catalyst that will do just that. This bill will hold perpetrators accountable and provide justice to survivors. Let us remember that gender-based violence is not an isolated issue. It is interconnected with other forms of discrimination, such as racism and xenophobia. Therefore, our fight against gender violence must be intersectional and inclusive, recognizing the unique challenges faced by marginalized communities. As this government strives to eradicate gender-based violence, let us pledge to be active allies, promoting respect and gender equality in our homes, workplaces, and communities. Together, we can create a society where everyone feels safe, valued, and empowered, regardless of their gender.
Yes.
The Protection Against Violence Act 2023 is an important step in the right direction. But senators, it is just the beginning. this government has once again shown its compassion and interest in the social development of our people. If it's one thing the side opposite must agree with us, it's that we take pride and emphasize on the core needs of our Bahamian people. The Protection Against Violence Bill 2023 allows for the establishment of a Protection Against Violence Commission, which will work with the responsible minister to ensure that victims are treated with compassion and dignity and have access to justice without unnecessary delays and impediments. This commission is comprised of representatives from the Ministries of Health, Local Government, Education, Science and Technology, the Attorney General's Office and Legal Affairs, Youth, Sports and Culture, as well as the Department of Social Services, as well as 3 other appointed stakeholders with active involvement in these issues. This team will be capable of moving the machinery of the government to tackle various facets of these issues. The Commission will not only advise on its policies, it will oversee the implementation of a national strategic plan for combating and responding to violence. The work of the Commission will inform policies, promote awareness of human rights, allocate resources for specialized services, promote education and sensitivity training, and promote programs and policies that are gender sensitive, equitable, and lead toward greater gender equality and improved gender relations in our country. The Commission will also partner with community groups to offer safe houses and proper care to our victims. This will include non-governmental organizations such as Zonta, Women United, FOAM, Links, and Senator Ellis, even sororities. I urge each member of this esteemed upper house to support and consider the significance of this bill. Let us be the champions of change, the advocates for the vulnerable, voiceless, and the guardians of justice. Together, we can create a safer, more compassionate society where our victims of violence find solace, support, and hope for a brighter future. Let us provide assurances that they are not alone in their journey to overcome violence. Let us rise above the political differences and stand together for the rights of victims and for the rights of Bahamians. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable Quinton Lyburn, for your contribution. As many.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Darren Hentfield.
Thank you, Madam President. It's been a long day. It's been a very long day. In fact, Madam President, through you, I really don't understand why successive government senators have stood to their feet in this place. Even the independent ones, right? Even the independent ones, right? And intimate to the Bahamian public that this side, the opposition, does not support this bill.
When your leader called Obi Wilson and told him he was voting no.
The lower house voted yes.
What did he say on this?
You ought to be more discreet than that, than to discuss private conversations between leaders. You ought to be more discreet than that, right? And so at the end of the day, His Majesty's loyal opposition in the other place voted in support of the bill. No, they voted in support of the bill over there. And we gave no indication in this place. No indication in this place that we wouldn't support the bill.
So speak in support as well.
So,
don't just
so,
vote in support.
You
Speak
know,
in support.
and I think that is the issue. The issue. Therein lies the issue, right? Therein lies the rub, right? As you know, Madam President, I'm going to focus today, so that we can get out of here, right? I'm going to speak to the President. You know, not because, Madam President, we don't believe, or we don't conform to every line and every every dot in a bill, right? That we disagree with the bill. In fact, we believe that this bill is a step in the right direction. That's what we really truly believe, because we all want to see the best for Bahamians. And this monopoly that decide, that governs, always put forward as if they only feel they know what is best and do what is best in the interest of the Bahamian people, must be dispelled. It must be dispelled. Madam President, because it is not true. It is not true. I want to, before I continue, I want to recognize Her Excellency, Rubian Darling, the first woman to vote, to register to vote in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And my lady, you stayed the course. They all came here early and they left. You are still here with us. And I want to recognize your presence, ma'am. Yeah. You know, Madam President, as I said, I wish to begin by applauding the broad intent of this bill, as stated in the objects and reasons, which is so, I mean, to generally provide, which it says is to generally provide for the protection of and support for victims of violence. I mean, who in their right mind would not wish to support a bill which seeks to help and assist those who are victims of violence? And you know, my brother Reuben Raming said something. You know, he said, and we say this from time to time. I've even heard colleagues allude to it. This is the upper house, man. We don't get down in the mud and the miry clay and the mire like people in the other place. Right? We are statesmen in here. And if we disagree with something, we would say that's our duty. It is our job as His Majesty's loyal opposition to say what we disagree with.
Yep.
And you know, I said in here the other day, Madam President, iron sharpen iron. And hopefully when we disagree, sometimes the government will go back and have a look at what we're saying.
And that's happened.
It has happened.
Even in this administration.
And so when you operate as an opposition ought to operate, you make the government better. And when you make the government better, Madam President, you make life better for all Bahamians, yes, from Walker's Key to Inagua. all over the country, right? And so the tenets of this bill really, as was mentioned before, accords with the Convention of Belém do Pará, which simply means that women have a right to live a life free of violence. And they do. And so we are now here codifying today what we will do for those women who have been unfortunate victims of violence. And that is a good step and a good thing to do. God knows, NGOs like FOAM, Candy Gibson was here earlier today, which is led by our friend Candy Gibson and others, have been carrying on this burden for far too long. And it's time, it's good time for the government to step in and seek to do some things differently to help with the burden of how do you care. And for Candy, this was a personal mission, having been the victim of violence, to live through what happens when you lose a loved one to violence, a breadwinner in the home to violence, and what happens to the children, what happens to the family that's left behind. And that's what Senator Raming was referring to when he talked about restorative justice, right? There is this concept or doctrine in law called restorative justice, which AGB need to look at in the Bahamas. Because it is, and the senator put it quite bluntly, it is not just all well and good for a healthy-bodied man who's destroyed a family, taken away the breadwinner, destroyed the mind of the breadwinner, because in most of our homes, Bahamian women are the breadwinners, yep, right? And left her distraught, and then he goes to Fox Hill Prison, if we find him, and just sits there, Madam President, a healthy, well-bodied man who could water the state, who will be taken care of, who could be put to work and made to support that family which they interrupted. which they caused to be in such hardship. And I believe it is high time that we start to begin to look at restorative justice in the Bahamas, Mr. A.J. Yeah, you can. You can find work for them to do. They get paid for billing, license plate and stuff anymore. Whatever they get paid, give that to the family they disrupted.
All of them mean without means.
Whatever they get paid, give that to the family that they destroyed. And as the senator said, if they have means left here, let's get that stuff to take care of the families that they destroyed. Now that's the point he wanted to make, and I wanted to support that point. And so what we do here today, Madam President, presents a step in the right direction. We on this side believe it is a good thing to do. You know, when you look at, it's not always what we do, you know. Sometimes it's how we do it that causes the issue. And Madam President, in the book of Romans 14 and 16, you know, we admonished by the right, I believe it was Paul. He says, let not your good be spoken evil of. Mm-hmm. So if you're doing a good thing, why are you going to let it be spoken evil of? If you're doing a good thing, let not your, not, and we didn't oppose your bill, you know. 6 or 7 groups of women who have been in this struggle and fight for years upon years, Madam President. They said that they didn't like the way some things were done. And we're simply their voice. They're not in here to speak their voice. And some of them said, when they wanted to speak their voice, they were not given the privilege or the opportunity to do so. Now, that's what they say. That's what they say.
Yeah,
right?
That's what they say.
And these are women who have committed their lives to the protection and defense of women. You know, I heard somebody say, some of us sit right there. It only could be me and me, because I was in the cabinet, Ruben. Ruben was in the law house, right? Yeah. And I always try to explain some things, you know. Cabinet has a collective voice, right? It means that we sit around the table and we argue, we fuss, and we fight. They can tell you. Sometimes you come to blows. No, maybe not you and Mike. Maybe not you and Mike, but knowing you. Maybe not you and Mike, but knowing you. You just fuss with somebody, right? But at the end of the day, the cabinet comes up with a collective determination, right? And that's what the voice of the cabinet ought to be. And if you have, as a member of the cabinet, if you have such a fundamental disagreement with what they have decided, Madam President, you step away. You resign, you go, you leave. I know some of the things I see in the public lately these fellas didn't agree with. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. I didn't step away because I didn't see anything fundamentally so disruptive that I ought to step away. See, y'all just missed the whole point, because you sit right here all day looking to be nitpicking over nonsense. Just looking to nitpick over nonsense all day. I'm trying to elucidate some things in your mind so that you can understand, if you perhaps get an opportunity to one day sit in that place. If you get an opportunity to sit in that place, you'd understand how it functions. That's what I'm trying to do. You know? That's what I'm trying to do. So, Madam President, we shouldn't let our good be spoken evil of. And these women with groups that were working for so long and so hard in the interest of violence against women, the protection of women and children, they don't like the way some things happened. And it is their right to say, ain't everybody going to agree with everything that you do? I've been married for 38 years. My wife and I don't agree on everything. But I soldier on, and she soldiers on in the interest of our family. That's the way it is. So here's a good case of trying to do a good thing and helping victims of crime, but so many important entities in our country are registering their concern about the way it was done. They have a right to do that. As lawyers, when we do judicial reviews, we don't look at the decision, you know. We look at the process by which we came to that decision. That is all we do. And so these ladies have looked at this. These groups have looked at the process and determined that they don't like the process. Now the government determined as it can in his policy initiative to move on, to move forward. To move forward. But I can tell you one thing, when we used to determine to move forward in the face of plenty of disruption and people saying no, that's why we're sitting on this side today. That's why we're sitting on this side today, and they sitting on that side today. So, mind you, you can have your way as a government. You could do what you feel like. You could do what you feel like. But at the end of the day, when they get in that little box, Bahamians don't forget. Bahamians don't forget. I support them. I support them. I support their work. I support what they do. I already told you I wouldn't know. I already told you I wouldn't know. But I support the women. I support them in their position. I support them in their position. And so let's begin with our human rights expert, Ambassador Marion Bethel says, who serves as vice chairperson and rapporteur on the United Nations Committee on the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. And we were happy. I was happy as Minister of Foreign Affairs to support her last election to that post, because she's one of the foremost minds in the region when you come to talking about the rights and protection of women. And in the world, very highly respected. And so she's one of those individuals that would cross party lines. We don't see her as politics. We see her as apolitical. A sound Bahamian woman, quite competent in her views and in the positions that she's held. That's how we see her. And so in an article in the Nassau Guardian, and they don't, let me say this to you, because it came to me through the grapevine. They do not wish to be political. All they want to do is to be heard. They don't want to be political. They don't want to get into politics. And so I hope I'm not offending her by using her article now, because I didn't speak to her about this before I decided to do so. But it's in the public domain. It's in the papers, right? And so in the article in the Guardian, dated the 31st of July 2023, under the topic, CEDAW rep says new bill fails human rights standards. Now, you could go and pull back the veil and see which standards these may be that she refers to, but I'm sure, oh yeah, I adopt everything I read. Everything I read in here, my lady, I'll adopt. Everything. But she is very adept, very astute, very intellectually sound. If you sit and have a conversation with her, I'm sure she will explicate to you. She will explicate to you exactly what she means. Exactly what she means. She's quite capable of doing so, and I have confidence in her that she can do so. That she can do so without impediment. Without impediment. It's the kind of confidence I repose in her. And so here's what she says. The CEDAW rep says the new bill fails human rights standards. She says the 2023 bill places everything under the Ministry of Social Services. The minister has total power and control, in my view, and this will get bogged down. I want to read carefully now, so I don't misquote her, right? And it will get bogged down in government bureaucracy. And I don't think it is an effective way to address this very, very egregious and insidious problem that we're dealing with. You know what she's saying, in my opinion? She's saying that the Ministry of Social Services is already inundated. Can't manage what they're supposed to be managing now. That's what she's asserting. So, yeah. Just let me speak, though. Just let me speak, right? With the greatest respect, just let me speak. And so she's saying, Madam President, that the Ministry of Social Services has so many other challenges. Why are we going to take now and put the administration of how we address the victims of violence in the hands of the Ministry of Social Services, which, in my humble opinion, hasn't proven to us yet that they can manage what they're supposed to be managing in the first instance? Correct. And my learned friend, Senator Barnett Ellis, made this point, but she was shouted down. And it's a very simple point, Why hadn't we considered, perhaps, Madam President, taking groups like FOAM and Bishop Hansel and the rest of them who do this work, and giving them, if we didn't feel they were competent enough to manage government funds, giving them an administrative arm of the government to say, work with these people. These people know this business. They've been doing it for many, many years. They do it every day. They know the victims. They know the challenges. They know the problems. It's a consideration. You know, it's a consideration. But you've taken a policy decision, and we understand that. I just agree with her that it's not a good decision. It's not a good decision. And in Section 7 of the bill, it says to us that the minister will be responsible for managing the affairs of the victims of violence. It's not a good fit. Hey, you open yourself up for more politics. Or you ain't dealing with me because I'm F&M. Or you ain't dealing with me because I'm BDP or independent or, you know, that's what you open yourself up for when you do things like this. I thought that's what I thought it was. I thought it was in Section 7, where the minister has charge of the events. Well, it's in the bill. It's in the bill. It's in the bill. It's in the bill. Where after consultation with the committee, the minister will have the final say, right? That's what it says? Anyway, that's the point I wish to make. He has responsibility for the management of this system. That's the only point I want to make. Yeah, we ain't perfect like you know. You perfect. You perfect, man. You perfect. You ain't perfect like you. So sometimes we'll quote a wrong section. Sometimes we'll quote a wrong section, right? No, this is what I read. This is what I read. I believe the point she makes is based on the notion that 3 of the top 10 recorded rape rates in the world occur in the Caribbean, and the Bahamas leads the Caribbean, followed by St. Vincent and the Grenadines. That ain't no stat we ought to be a part of. We don't want to be a part of a stat like that. But it's our reality. It's our reality, and we have issues. We have social problems. That's why we don't have time for petty politics. We have too many problems with petty politics, right? We need to find out why young men, and in some cases even older men, will determine to go into an 80-odd-year-old woman's home and have his way with her, without her consent. Madam President, we have real issues in the Bahamas. We have issues where a young woman cannot, in peace and safety, take to the streets in the morning and walk to exercise. I mean, I don't know what we're raising in these homes in the Bahamas anymore, right? Where I grew up on the island, I hear people telling there's an island boy. Where I grew up on the island, I couldn't walk past an elder person without saying good evening or good morning. My grandmother didn't have a phone, but when I get home, she would have that window stick, and I would feel the wrath of my grandmother. But what are we doing? We to the place in the Bahamas right now, Madam President, where we are fearful of correcting some of these wayward young men. Because, you know, I spend my life in the military, I might get in trouble. And so I try to deal with them 3 in my house, right? Well, 2 gone now, but I try to deal with them even in their house, right? Right? And that's the way it is. Be afraid to even address these wayward young men who have no fear for law, no respect for life, for nothing. And I don't know if they fear God, the way they conduct themselves. How do you entice a 9-year-old little girl? I have a 9-year-old granddaughter. Come on, man. What are you supposed to do? What are you supposed to do, my lady? What are you supposed to do if they do that to my little Dahlia? What am I supposed to do? The AG would have me. He would have me. He would have me. Entice a 9-year-old little child to come beckon her to a car, take her, have your way with her. And that's what I heard some preachers on the TV with the other night, you know. They were from the College of Bishops. I think it was Bishop DeAnsa Cunningham and my good friend from the Feeding Ministry, Bishop Hanchel. And you know what they were calling for? And Madam President, we may need to consider some things differently. They were calling for more safer punishment. They called for castration, and they call for and castration doesn't have to be physical anymore, you know. You could give them the needle, and they never see the light of day with that thing again, because they're using that improperly. And if you can't use what you have properly, you ought not have it. And that's what the president was saying. And then he said, you know, they should get some of the cat going in and some of the cat coming out. Now we all know in this modern Bahamas, the cat, that is inhumane. Because the cat was used, you know, in a judicious way, harkening back to slavery. And so, but so how inhumane is it to take a 9-year-old child? To take a 9-year-old child. And then I made this point to the Attorney General this morning. The Attorney General made a wonderful presentation when we were here last about bail. And I support your views. But I also believe that could be extended to rapists. Because the points that you made, elucidated by the Court of Appeal, right, was that the person who has committed the offense can be denied bail if the court believes that if he's put back into society, there would be some act of retribution. And then, on the other hand, the court also holds that if putting him back in society will cause problems for society, the peace and safety of good people, then he ought to remain in prison. Do you know how difficult it is to look at a man accused of raping your child, walking around in the community every day, and going places and just living like all is normal? And you know, the Constitution is right. Every man is innocent until he's proven guilty. And we must stand by that. That is our supreme law. But in some instances where we have irrefutable DNA evidence and other evidence, physical evidence, to say this fella did this, man, he should never see the light of day. He should never see the light of day until he gets his due recompense for what he's done. And so I believe the point that she makes is based on this notion that we have so many sexual offenses in the Bahamas. And we don't need more bureaucracy in the way we litigate them. On the point of consultation, the ambassador, she reported, the ambassador from CEDAW reported, she's reported as saying that she had requested a meeting with the Minister of Social Service earlier in the month to address the matter, but the meeting never happened. I don't know why you wouldn't want to meet with a woman so well versed in women's affairs. I don't know why you wouldn't want to meet with her. And if he felt he met with us sufficiently, then he should say so. So Ambassador Bethel says, is quoted as saying, "So I can only speak personally for myself to say I did try to intervene, because there's this constant refrain about people not trying to make interventions before this thing came to Parliament." And she's defending her position. I did try to have the sit-down conversation. It never happened. I'm quoting her. But I think as a group, as part of the collective, we were also waiting for more public consultation with the minister and the Ministry of Social Services in between the time that the first one took place, which was the only time we were told it was going to be in Parliament. So after the first one took place, they didn't get to see him again. The good minister was probably busy, I don't know. They didn't get to see him again, so when they listened, the thing was in Parliament. And that's when they determined that they would register their complaint publicly. Before then, they wasn't saying that, you know. But these Bahamian women, they don't take no last. If they get something on their mind to speak, they can speak that. So now, as we were told earlier by Senator Barnard Ellis, we see in today's Guardian, as well, Madam President, this one here is the one I quoted from. I can table it. You want to wait till I'm done? I can table it. They can copy it and give me my paper back, because I like keep my references, right? We see in today's paper. You see the headline in today's paper, and that's just talking about consultation, right? Yeah. We see, and this church is a very powerful entity in this country. Very, very powerful entity in this country. And I listened to the comments of the president. I listened to them very, very carefully. And you know what it summed up to? He said, if you don't want to talk to me now, I can speak to my congregants. And they got many, many churches to speak with. Yeah, this Bishop Fernando, good man, decent man, right? And so we see here in the paper, and he didn't They didn't come to talk about the bill in consultation. The gist of their thing was the violence. And they spoke about the young girl that I spoke about, Madam President. And that's what they were talking about. That's a conversation you can have with him. I don't speak for him. He said church leaders decry the country's rape culture. And to hear the president of the Christian Council talk about the Bahamas having a rape culture, it tells you the gravity, tells you the seriousness as to where we are. Because that's the last thing he want to find himself in the public domain saying. So he urges strong action against sex attackers. Strong action. And of course, you know, when these things happen, people call for heavier punishments. Rightly so. Because we got to bring this country back in line. You know, I told you all in here the other day, Madam President, Lynn and them did their part, you know. They brought us to independence. They set up some wonderful institutions. But there's some things we have to do. There's some things that are left for us to do. Does it mean that we walk away from the Privy Council in criminal matters and just let them adjudicate our matters as it relates to business and civil, in the civil district of the court? I mean, they tried it in the Caribbean, with the Caribbean Court of Justice, and they still hold true to Pratt and Morgan. Same thing handed down by the Privy Council, which says that to execute someone for murder is inhumane, especially when you have them waiting for so. Well, how inhumane is it for a man to sit in the rain, wait for another man to come and gun him down or chop him up with a cutlass, as the one you alluded to today, and then he goes and sit in prison? How inhumane is that? Sometimes I wonder who we're fighting for. And so now, as we were told earlier, you know, the Christian Council laments the fact that there wasn't enough consultation. And ministers in the same paper, you know. Ministers in the same paper, on the same page above the fold, under headline, Government Open to Amendments to Protection Against Violence Bill. You understand what that means? You get what that means? Okay. The government now is open to amendments, but push through over there. Got it out of committee and over here for us now to push through. To push through. To push through, right? So why not? What if it have harmed the government? To let the consultation go on, and then come and bring it, because you know, when I look at the full, no, we want to support this. We want to support it. We can tell you we don't like about it, but we can support it. I support some things I don't like, you know. You do too. Yeah, you support a lot of stuff you don't like. You support a lot of stuff you don't like. Most of us support things we don't like, but because we do. Yeah. You know exactly what I mean. And so here's the minister in the very paper this morning saying that he opened the consultation. Well, they got to make this make sense, man. You got to make this make sense. You don't make this make sense. You can be right over here where we are in the next lap. You don't make this make sense. Did I tell you? Trust me, mark my word when I tell you that. Mark my word when I tell you that. This, after the Bahamas Christian Council, led by its president, Bishop Delton Fernanda, just yesterday lamented the lack of consultation, while it's calling for more action in the wake of a reported increase in rape. So as we address the issues associated with the victims of crime today, we must not lose sight, Madam President. We must not lose sight of those who simply wish to live a life free of violence in our country. Like, we can't lose sight. I mean, okay, so this bill will address, hopefully if it works the way it's intended to, will address the victims of crime. But we need to get more serious about mitigating crime. Because we can't, this could be perceived, Madam President, as a band-aid we putting on the issue. Yeah, I agree. We agree that these people need help, right? But grandmothers should be able to lay down in their house free from interference Young women should be able to get out and exercise on the road free from interference. Young wives should be able to go to the gas station and don't get caught up in a gang fight, free from interference. So what we must do, either we got to spend more money on cameras, we got to do something different than what we're doing. And all we've been doing for years and years, successive governments, you know, we buy more policemen, we hire more policemen, we buy more cars and accoutrement. We got more accoutrement right here. And I read this in Bratton's book, a commissioner. Bratton was commissioner in New York somewhere. And he came here at some point. I read this somewhere. And he said, we have more policemen, more equipment per capita than New York. So something we ain't doing right. And so governments like to just, we did it too, we do it too. We recruit. And we throw manpower, we throw equipment. Huh? You know police plan? You think that's what it is? Don't let a minister hear you. And so as we address these issues associated with the victims of crime today, we must not lose sight of those who simply wish to live free of crime in their country, the peaceful Bahamas. I wish we can get more people to go back to the family islands. And even in some family islands, like Abaco, where I'm from, and Grand Bahama, who think they're not a family island. I don't study them though, right? I'm only joking with you, right? Crime is rising there. And places like Ilustra. I saw the other day in Exuma, they had a bank robbery or something. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. And so we have to address the root causes of these issues. The social causes of why young men, in particular, feel like they could live in a country without rules and without regulation. So Lyndon was doing something, you know. You all hear me talk about Sir Lyndon a lot. I read his book. I read Sir Lyndon, and I'm reading Ingram, and I read Turnquest, and all these fellows who came before us. So we could understand why they did some things, right? So Lyndon wanted to start a national service. But the pushback that he got when he started the Defense Force, which I benefited from, which I joined in 1981, he didn't feel at that stage in his political career. And if you were listening to Lady Pinland when she spoke at one of those events we had for independence, she said it. She said, you know, it was difficult for him to push through with that. And that's one of the things that she lamented. Because I believe if Sir Lyndon was allowed to push through with that plan of conscription, in places like Israel and Germany, you serve 3 years. You ain't doing nothing constructive, you come in the army for 3 years, right? Or you go to the police force or go to some discipline service for 3 years. And when you come out, you get used to folding up your blanket, making up your bed, and answering yes or no, sir. And yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. And watching the flag go up and come down, and that means something to you. You're doing a good job with them young men you got there, Brother Duncan. Keep up the good work. And so there is one that this is one that we all agree with, to help the victims of crime, but we cannot rest on our laurels as the numbers of the victims of crime continue to grow. Because at some point we're not going to be able to do it. And that's why I believe they should pay who commit crime, and not just wait on other people to pay for the harm and the evil they cause in our society. Grandmothers, mothers, wives, sisters, granddaughters, and others must feel safe in our country. They must. Some say we need stiffer penalties. I don't know. And you do the sociology on it, you do the studies. Sometimes it comes out even. But I know one thing. That one would swing for killing someone, he ain't gonna kill nobody else. And then there's always this counter argument, you know, maybe you hang the wrong one. But Grandma used to say, if you had not with the crow been found, you'd have been at home safe and sound. Safe and sound, all right? And that's what I tell my sons. And so we don't have to spend time rowing and debating over redundancies. We got too much work to do, brothers and sisters, Madam President. We have too much work to do. We have such a wonderful country to preserve, with such fine people, the finest people in the world. It's better in the Bahamas. It's better in the Bahamas, and I believe that. So with that, Madam President, that's my contribution I rest. You want time? I don't have no time for foolishness, man. I'm too old for that now. I'm too old for that now. Foolishness? I don't have no time for that, man.
Thank you for your contribution, Senator the Honorable Darren Hentfield. As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Dr. Eurecia Hepburn Forbes.
Thank you.
Madam President. Madam President, on this wonderful Wednesday, move what? There? Okay. Sorry, sir. Madam President, on this wonderful Wednesday, I am grateful and humbled to continue to be chosen to be a senator of our great nation and to represent the people of the Bahamas. Daily, I thank God for this opportunity to serve, and I'd like to take this opportunity to extend my gratitude, as always, to the Honorable Prime Minister for continuing to repose his confidence in me. Madam President, every time I rise in this honorable house, I will publicly thank my parents, who I know for sure are watching, and who have been the best role models and supporters a child could ask for. My husband, who always provides support, and all of my family and friends, noting in particular this day, my church family of St. Gregory's and our leader, Canon Campbell. I am willing to serve to make our country stronger and better because all of you. Madam President, before I get into the full details of my debate, please permit me 2 minutes to publicly tell my Aunt Frances and Gaudy Estelle happy birthday. I would also like to pay condolences to Carolyn Farrington and her family on the passing of Minister Rosalie Farrington Wilkinson, her sister, to the family of Roberta Turnquest Sands, affectionately known as Bobby, and I would also like to express my condolences to the McKay family on the passing of Kimberly McKay. May they rest in peace and rise in glory. Madam President, I would also like to thank the staff that made the second annual BAMSI summer camp a success. Each day we aim to make it best at BAMSI. Madam President, I stand with you in greeting the members of the gallery that came in the morning to view the debate of such a historic bill. In particular, Ms. Anne Marie Davis, Ms. Cynthia Mother Pratt, Her Excellency, who is still with us, Ms. Ruby Darling, Ms. Reverend Sandra Walker, who is still with us, Inspector Kendra Wims, Ms. Candy Skipson, Ms. Jennifer Isaac Stotson, Ms. Erin Brown, Ms. Patrice Ann Clare, Mrs. Podesta Moore, Ms. Vanessa Scott, Ms. Cecilia Scott, Mr. Joe Johnson, and Mr. Jordan Clark. My heart was warmed to see how full our gallery was this morning, and I hope that this is a clear testament to the amount of support that resonates for this bill. Madam President, I am thankful to have stood on the shoulders of some of these great persons who have supported and worked with me in numerous areas and have been championing women's rights for most of my lifetime. I will reiterate what Senator Pickstock sentiments in calling these women here and the ones who are doing their part in making our country better each and every day, our Bahamian Wonder Women. Madam President, I was a girl when a family friend was briefly moved into our home because of abuse by her boyfriend. It made no sense to me, and I recall having a discussion with my father asking, how is it that a man could beat a woman, as my daddy never even spanked me? Why wasn't he in jail? At that time, I never knew that something like this could even possibly happen. As my grandfather, Chief Inspector Hepburn, always drummed in our heads, 2 things should never happen. You should never forget to say your prayers, and a man should never hit a woman. This act of kindness by my parents, moving that person into our home, raised awareness in me that everyone's village was not the same. Madam President, I've been an active member of several civil society organizations, and an active member of the Gender and Family Affairs Monthly Forum with non-governmental organizations. For those who may have participated in one meeting, they may be able to stand and make accusations about consultation. However, for those of us that have been in the trenches for more than a decade, we are well of the consultative process on previous and several versions of this bill. Also, Madam President, from 2014, I have participated in the Commission of Status of Women, commonly called CSW. As a matter of fact, in 2014, the theme was gender and agriculture, and I spoke at a side event. Those meetings and discussions have been enlightening and so informative on the ways to engage and promote CSOs to make a difference in their society. Madam President, this is not a bill I just started taking interest in when I became a politician or following the consultative process. The AG spoke about the 2016 bill, which I have in my phone, and I recall being a part of the focus group discussing these matters as well. The PLP has always been open to hearing from the citizens of our nation. And there have been several meetings, one even with the pastors, taking place last September to discuss this and other bills of this nature. However, Madam President, I do not recall any bill being presented, discussed, or brought up by the Free National Movement, much less one being brought to Parliament. Madam President, like my Senate colleague Turner stated, if we seek perfection, we ought to be reminded that perfection is only in Jesus Christ. So while this is not a perfect bill, I applaud this administration for reaching out and having feedback and putting it on the table and passing this Protection Against Violence Women bill. Madam President, we all must admit that this is a step in the right direction. Madam President, the nerve of some to speak about this bill and indicate that we do not act as governments are continuous, when from 2017 to 2021, there were no bills, zero, brought to this or any of the houses discussing this topic. And 2017 is closer to 2016 by anyone's math. Madam President, some would use analogies that this bill is more than nothing but opening an umbrella to a certain grouping while it rains. Well, let me tell you, Madam President, this government's umbrella is strong, it's wide, it's sturdy, and will keep you dry. Madam President, some of those persons in that other grouping were too busy worried about their special interest groups than to worry about the people of our country. But Madam President, we are a caring government. When we look, if we take a minute and just look and stroll back historically, Madam President, we've all heard the names. Courtney McKenzie, 17, of Exuma, was stabbed to death. And 2 days later, on San Salvador, Anika Johnson, 21, was also stabbed to death. Another pregnant woman, Marisha Clinton Lewis, 30, was shot to death. A 26-year-old father was charged with incest, indecent assault, and child cruelty. A 29-year-old man was accused of indecent assault of his 13-year-old niece. A man was convicted of unlawful sexual intercourse, the survivor, the 15-year-old daughter of his friend. A 28-year-old accused of sexual abuse of his 6-year-old daughter. A man sentenced to 28 months in prison for groping and sexually assaulting a woman. And most recently, Madam President, a 42-year-old man of Somerset Estate, arrested on Sunday night in relation to the abduction and sexual assault of a 9-year-old girl on Saturday evening. Madam President, this is the one thing I agree with on this side. This is not sustainable, and these incidents have become way too frequent. Madam President, we have all heard or read stories No people, and for some, the stark reality is that they have been subjected to some form of violence. In an article from 2009 in The Guardian, it was stated that, consistent with the rise in domestic abuse statistics, most of the females' murders are linked in domestic disputes. Even with the rise in violence against women, women's rights activist Dr. Sandra Dane Patterson said calls to the Bahamas Crisis Center have increased tremendously, particularly regarding intimate partner violence and domestic violence. While she could not comment on any of the murders specifically, she said that there are many risk factors associated with abuse. One of them, heavy drinking. She told The Guardian recently, given the economic situation in the country, obviously the level of that kind of stress is much higher. The other thing is men are going through some challenges in terms of holding jobs. If you look at how men are socialized, they are socialized to be in control. You have circumstances where they're not in control and they're more likely to lash out. Those may be some of the factors. Dr. Dane Patterson said women must try to get out of abusive relationships as soon as possible. However, she added that it's always the most dangerous time. She recommended that women get in contact with an agency or a close friend before they make a move. Madam President, that article is more than a decade old, and sadly, it is still relevant today. Violence against women is a serious and widespread problem that affects our lives, health, dignity, and security of millions of women and girls around the world. It is also a human rights violation that undermines the progress and development of any society. This bill, the objectives are: 1, a national strategy to prevent and respond to the occurrence of violence and to protect victims of violence by promoting a strong multidisciplinary community and services for a comprehensive management of victims and offenders. 2, a system of information gathering for the purpose of generating reliable statistics in instances where violence in domestic relationships result in death. And 3, compliance with regional and international human rights treaty obligations of the Bahamas. I will take them step by step. The first tenet of this act, Madam President, that the bill is a national strategy to prevent and respond to the occurrence of violence and to protect victims of violence by promoting a strong multidisciplinary community and services for the comprehensive management of victims and offenders. This bill does this in leaps and bounds, Madam President, by ensuring that there's a paradigm shift in our society. The only way we can get there is through the promotion of education and training of all those involved. Last year, in an article in the Tribune, we saw the article in the Tribune called "We See Violence Against Women." The excerpt states, law enforcement and those in the justice system are completely disconnected from the reality of this issue and the impact it has on human beings. So to the author of the Tribune article, please note that this bill provides training and education to those in law enforcement and all levels of administration of justice to assist with the eradication of violence against all genders, and particularly women. This bill goes on to provide additional services to those that have been subjected to violence for not only themselves, but their families. Madam President, the United Nations has stated violence against women is rooted in persisting gender stereotypes and patriarchy that result in unequal distribution of power and resources between men and women of the society. Violence against women is also influenced by social and cultural norms that tolerate or justify such behavior as a way of discipline or controlling women. Madam President, this bill promotes and supports governmental and private sector education designed to raise awareness of the general public, something that is much needed to ensure that that shift in the paradigm is in the right direction. Madam President, the second objective of this bill, a system of information gathering for the purpose of generating reliable statistics in instances where violence in domestic relationships results for death. Madam President, if you do a quick Bing or Google search on this topic, you are most likely to find that there are no official statistics. There are no official statistics that will come up. This bill will change that result setting. Madam President, let me share some of the deep dive statistics that illustrate the magnitude and severity of violence against women in the Bahamas. Some sources indicate that domestic violence is a common and widespread problem in the Bahamas, accounting for 25% of regional murders. In 2021, there were 3,283 incidents of domestic violence reported to the police, compared to 2,754 in 2020. There are also 8 domestic-related murders, 5 attempted murders, 792 assaults, 71 assaults with a deadly weapon, 16 stabbings, and 1 shooting. For the first 6 months of 2021, 1,200 abuse cases were referred to the Bahamas Crisis Center. However, the reality is these numbers are most likely to be underestimates, as many cases of violence against women go unreported due to fear, shame, stigma, or lack of access to the justice and support services. But our Senator Russell told us, now we no longer have to fear. Women don't have to worry about those issues because of this bill. There's another reason why we should keep the course. A quick historical snapshot will show that from 2011 to now, the incidence of violence against women, rape, unlawful sexual intercourse, domestic-related murders, attempted murders, assault, and abuse have increased, sadly. Madam President, though, this government has a plan, and it is clear and it is outlined. They are working with organizations to train and raise awareness, and this bill will only facilitate this process more. In 2021, I, along with Ms. Moore, participated in a training for psychosocial support along with Inspector Wims, who is now in charge of the Violence Against Women Unit. See, this government understands that we train and educate persons first, and then we put them in place. Yes. Madam President, the third objective of this bill is for the compliance with regional and international human treaty obligations. Madam President, there have been several terms presented here, and the teacher in me will not allow me to stand and not explain a few of them. So I would like to discuss briefly so we can ensure that we are all on the same page and not reading different books, or some of us in a different library. Unlawful sexual intercourse is defined as having sexual intercourse with any person older than 14 and younger than 16, or 18 for same-sex activity, with or without consent. This means that anyone who engages in sexual activity with a minor under the age of 16 or 18 for same-sex activity can be charged with unlawful sexual intercourse, regardless of whether the minor consented or not. Unlawful sexual intercourse is a criminal offense that carries a penalty of up to a life imprisonment. Rape is defined as having sexual intercourse with another person, this pains me, who is not his or her spouse without consent. This means that anyone who forces or coerces another person to have sex with them can be charged with rape, except if the victim is their spouse. Rape is also a criminal offense that carries a penalty of up to a life imprisonment. Protection against violence is a broad term that refers to the measures and actions taken to prevent and respond to any form of violence that affects the safety, dignity, and well-being of individuals or groups. Protection against violence can include legal, institutional, policy, programmatic, and community-based interventions that aim to protect the rights and needs of victims and survivors, as well as to hold perpetrators accountable and deter future violence. Gender-based violence is a specific type of violence that is directed to a person because of their sex or gender identity. GBV is rooted in gender inequality, discrimination, and harmful norms that perpetuate the power imbalance between men and women and between different gender groups. GBV can include physical, sexual, psychological, economic, and social forms of violence, such as domestic violence, rape, sexual harassment, female genital mutilation, child marriage, trafficking, and so-called honor crimes. GBV affects women and girls disproportionately, but can also affect men and boys, as well as people with diverse sexual orientations and gender identities. Therefore, the difference between protection against violence and gender-based violence is that the former is a general concept that covers all kinds of violence, while the latter is a specific category of violence that is based on gender and the other forms aforementioned. However, both terms are related and interlinked, are prevalent and pervasive forms of violence in the world, and requires effective protection measures to prevent and respond to it. Do not be mistaken. Madam President, CEDAW stands for the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which is an international treaty adopted by the United Nations in 1979 to promote and protect the human rights of women and girls. The Bahamas acceded to CEDAW in October 6, 1995, with some reservations. The Bahamas have submitted several periodic reports and followed, for the most part, most of the conventions. The Inter-American Convention on the Prevention, Punishment, and Eradication of Violence Against Women, also commonly called Bell de Paro Convention, Bahamas acceded on May 16, 1995. This is the first regional treaty that specifically focuses on violence against women as a human rights violation and a form of discrimination. By signing and ratifying these conventions, the Bahamas has committed to respect, protect, and fulfill the rights of women and girls in accordance with the international standards and obligations. Madam President, violence against women has devastating impacts on the physical, mental, emotional, and economic well-being of women and their families. It can cause injuries, disabilities, chronic disease, unwanted pregnancies, sexually transmitted infections, mental disorders, substance abuse, and even death. It can also affect the education, employment, participation, and empowerment of women in various spheres of life. Moreover, violence against women has negative consequences for the development and stability of the Bahamas as a whole. It costs the countries millions of dollars in healthcare, social services, legal fees, and loss of productivity. It also undermines the rule of law, democracy, and human rights that are essential for a peaceful and prosperous society. Madam President, as Senator Russell stated, this bill, however, will mend lives, restore dignity, and give all victims a fighting chance. Madam President, I recall that some of these issues are not simple, there are no simple solution, and this is a complex and multifaceted problem. It requires a comprehensive and coordinated approach that involves all stakeholders: government, civil society, private sector, media, religious leaders, community members, and especially men and boys. And some of the key actions of this bill coming from those stakeholders were: one, to adopt a comprehensive law, which we have done; to implement a national strategic plan to address these issues. This is stated in the bill. To provide adequate financing and resourcing for the prevention and response to violence against women at all levels. I, along with Ramin, hope in the next budget we see a more solid contribution. To strengthen the capacity and accountability of law enforcement, judiciary, and healthcare professionals to deal with these cases, cited in the bill. To establish specialized courts or tribunals for cases of violence against them, cited in the bill. To increase the availability and accessibility of shelters, hotlines, counseling service, and legal aids for victims of violence, cited in the bill. To enhance data collection and analysis on violence against women, to monitor and evaluate policies, cited in the bill. To raise awareness and educate on gender equality and human rights among the segments of the society, cited in the bill. To engage men and boys as allies and partners in preventing and ending violence against women, cited in the bill. What else could we do, Madam President? Madam President, this bill affects us all. Senator Kirk Russell said we will never go back, and I use the colloquial term, forward ever, backward never. In conclusion, Madam President, it is my hope that issues such as violence against women will be a thing of the past. The former Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, stated, "There is one universal truth applicable to all countries, cultures, and communities. Violence against women is never acceptable, never excusable, never tolerable. Violence against women is not inevitable, it's not acceptable." Madam President, in order to ensure that it is better in the Bahamas, we have to ensure that each and every one of us are doing our part. As Madam Chaplain stated this morning, we all have a role to play. And Madam President, violence is preventable, it is unacceptable, and we have to do something about it. It is our collective responsibility to take action and to stop it. Madam President, together we can create a safer and more equal society for all. I am proud to support this bill. And Madam President, I ask that God bless all of us present and to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
The chair thanks Senator the Honorable Dr. Eurecia Hepburn Forbes for your contribution. As many?
On the wrap-up.
The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Ryan Pinder.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to thank all of our colleagues. We're here at the end of this debate, still with a full House around the table. We should be proud of ourselves. And I think the only time we have had this was maybe the first debate, and now it's the last debate before the summer recess. We must have a recess more frequently to get out. I want to thank certainly all our colleagues for a vibrant debate today. I want to thank all of the members currently in the gallery and in the gallery this morning for showing their support to what we are doing today. Madam President, I won't take long, but I think it's necessary that I address a few issues. As you see, I have made some notes that the other side has brought up, both to clarify them, but also to expand on some of the observations that were made. I addressed most of the issues, all but one that Senator Barnett raised on my point of order. However, there was one point that was raised in response to my point of order that I think is necessary for me to address. Senator Barnett indicated that under the new bill, a Protection Against Violence bill, the one we debate today, that the minister has unfettered discretion to give directives to the board. And I assume that Minister Barnett was referring to Section 13 of the bill. One day, I hope so. One day. One day. Senator Barnett, where it speaks about minister may give directions. But I want to clarify, they're not unfettered. They're subject to the public interest. They have to be consistent with the objectives of the legislation and the provisions of the legislation. And I would tie you back to sections 6 and 7 of the bill, which requires the minister in exercising his duty, his or her duty, to consult with the authority. So back to the original proposition, this bill, like the 2016 bill, requires consultation by the minister. So I think it's important because the proposition of unfettered discretion to direct is something that we shouldn't let stand. Senator Seymour, I must say, I was rather disappointed with the posture of the contribution. Very adversarial in an environment that we are supposed to be collectively advancing something so important. I addressed many of her issues in my contribution, so I won't go through some of those. I'm happy to send my contribution to the good senator to review. However, one point I want to raise is that the senator seemed to advance the notion that this bill we debate today does not apply to gender-based violence. I think that was one of the central themes in the communication. Well, I would point the good senator to a number of sections in the bill that deal with women. Women would be Section 6, Section 7, Section 11, Section 29, all provide a framework of obligations of the commission and the minister with respect to addressing women in particularity. So certainly the bill would have an application towards women and gender-based matters. Now that dovetails into an observation made by Senator Ramming. And Senator Ramming spoke on the issue of gender and gender interpretation. And I want to point out, and you know, he's right in raising that issue, and I want to point out in the 2016 bill, we have a definition of gender or gender identification. And this definition is a singular definition for both. It says, means female or male, and the role individuals play in society as a result of their sex and status, and includes a person's identification as a male or female. All right? So I think that addresses the point from the 2016 bill's point of view of what Senator Ramming was speaking of. Now, we debated the Protection Against Violence 2023 bill, and I would just like to make note in that context, there is no definition of gender. And we choose in this bill, when we speak about gender, to address women and rights of women for protection and the other regime that are implied. So, you know, I just wanted the senator spent a good amount of time discussing this. It's obviously the interpretation of clauses is very important to him, and I thought it important to make that distinction between the two bills. I know on a sidebar we spoke about it, but I thought it important to make that point. The secondary point that the minister or the senator spoke about was the definition of child, and child being referenced to 18, and inconsistencies in our legislative regime as a whole with respect to setting years on different criteria for when you are a minor or a child. And he's absolutely correct. Our law is inconsistent throughout, and needs to be amalgamated to have some uniformity in application, which is a project we're working on. It's rather complex because you can imagine there are dozens of different pieces of legislation that refer to minors or children. Just in the context of this bill, I think it important to note that the definition of child as being under the age of 18 doesn't apply to any sort of criminal offense or prosecution. What it does is it provides for the regime for assistance and care to be given as a result of violence. So the bill takes the position a child is somebody under the age of 18 who also can be provided with the support mechanisms that lie in the bill when those support mechanisms are otherwise provided to a victim or the child is a victim. And yeah, go ahead.
We also know that there's also extension to minors while we also know that there exists. Thank you very much, Mr. AG, because this is very important for people to understand. We also do know the extension is also made in many of the regimes of minors who are still in school. So my child may go off to school, he may be from 18 to whatever. Could you?
Absolutely. No, we have an ongoing project in the Law Reform Commission to evaluate all pieces of legislation that address minors or children to figure out some sort of uniformity because the confusion is significant and the inequality in application of different pieces of legislation, especially in the criminal context, needs to be unified. Lastly, Senator Henfield had a very interesting contribution. And he started out speaking about the women's groups that objected and spoke about the press release and even used members, articles in the paper and a printout, I think, of a Twitter highlight from maybe Eyewitness News. Needless to say, I would like to add my reference to a news story of today that came out around lunchtime. It is by Eyewitness News, and it's entitled, "A Change of Heart." Several women's groups who initially objected to the Protection Against Violence bill and had called on government to delay the debate on the legislation were present in the upper chamber of the Senate today to show their support for the bill. So, you know, I can adopt that just like you can adopt that. That's fine. It's still up. So I just want to make that point. The other point that was made was that the bill shouldn't be with the Ministry of Social Services or the regime. Well, the regime isn't with the Ministry of Social Services. In fact, the composition and authority of the authority or commission under the Protection of Violence bill mimics materially to the authority that was to be designated under the 2016 bill. So I don't understand the criticism because nothing has really changed in that. Even the composition of the authority mimics that of the 2016 bill and includes appointments from NGOs in the private sector. So I just wanted to clarify that. It sounded like we had changed the framework, and we didn't change the framework when we established that. There's also criticism by Senator Henfield about the Minister of Social Services speaking about additional extended consultation. Now, no, that's an observation, and you can have your observations, but I tie you back to, I can't find a document now. I'll find it. I'll find it. I tie you back to the 2017 framework that I had alluded to specifically in my contribution. And that, just to go back, is a meeting hosted by the Minister of Social Services with the drafting team, both internally and with respect to civil society. And there was a specific determination that further adjustments to law and policy were recommended to be done after the constitution of the authority. Now, the reason for that was because the authority would be in the public domain, soliciting input and allowing for an avenue of further refinement. So when the minister speaks about further consultation, it is 100% in line with the recommendations of the group from 2017 who were reviewing the 2016 bill to refine it, to make it more palatable to bring and debate and put in place. So I think that's an important element to state. The last piece is, and trust me, I have no beef with Ms. Beth. We're friends and everything, but I don't want it to go without being said that this issue of compliance with international treaty obligations was scrutinized by the Office of the Attorney General. And we stand by our advice to the government that this bill, the Protection Against Violence Bill 2023, satisfies our obligation under the international treaties that I mentioned in my contribution. And I'll just leave it at that. So with that wrap up, again, I want to thank everybody for their enthusiasm and their attentiveness and their attendance. It's an important bill, and it's the end of our session, and we're not going to see each other again for at least 6 to 8 weeks. Well, I don't know what your side going to do. But having said that, I want to wish everybody a happy summer. I want to thank everybody for their vibrant debates over the last year, or this session, this seating. And with that, Madam President, I move for the second reading of the Protection Against Violence Bill 2023.
Good stuff, good stuff.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable Ryan Pinder. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to provide for the protection of and support for victims of violence, to establish the Protection Against Violence Commission, to enable the Bahamas to fulfill certain obligations arising under regional and international treaties, and for matters connected therewith. As many as in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those that oppose say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Order that the bill be read a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to provide for the protection of and support for victims of violence, to establish the Protection Against Violence Commission, to enable the Bahamas to fulfill certain obligations arising under regional and international treaties, and for matters connected therewith.
For the second reading of bills,
There are none, Madam President.
Committee of the Whole.
Madam President, I move that the Senate do now resolve itself into a committee of the whole with the Vice President in the chair.
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the Senate do now resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole with the Vice President as Chairman of the Committee of the Whole and in the chair. As many as in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion is carried.
Committee of the Whole.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, with respect to a bill for an act to amend the Antiquities, Monuments, and Museum Act to regulate and update the law relating to the recovery of underwater cultural heritage, I move that the long title be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I move that the short title of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The short title is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that clauses 2 and 3 of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that clauses 2 and 3 of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. Clauses 2 and 3 of the bill are agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that the bill be agreed in its entirety.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The bill is agreed in its entirety.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, with respect to the Governor General's Volunteer Society, a bill for an act to inspire, promote, and sustain a culture of volunteerism throughout the Bahamas, I move that the long title be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that the short title of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The short title is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that clauses, clauses 2 through 9 be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that clauses 2 through 9 of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. Clauses 2 through 9 of the bill are agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that the bill be now agreed in its entirety.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The bill is agreed in its entirety.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, with respect to a bill for an act to amend the Magistrates Act, I move that the long title be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that the short title be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The short title is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that clauses 2 through 17 be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that clauses 2 through 17 of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. Clauses 2 through 17 of the bill are agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that the bill be now agreed in its entirety.
Second.
That the bill be now agreed in its entirety, inclusive of the schedules.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill be agreed in its entirety, inclusive of the second schedule. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The bill is agreed in its entirety, including the schedule.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, with respect to a bill for an act to establish a parliamentary service for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, to provide for a parliamentary service commission, its membership, functions, procedures, and responsibilities, to provide for the transfer of public service officers to the parliamentary service, and for the continuation of their service on the same terms and conditions, and for connected matters therewith or incidental thereto. I move that the long title be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The long title of the bill is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that the short title of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The short title is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that clauses 2 through 31 of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that clauses 2 through 31 of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. Clauses 2 through 31 of the bill are agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that that the first and second schedule be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the first and second schedule of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The first and second schedule of the bill are agreed.
Mr. Chairman, sorry, there's only one schedule. So I move that the schedule of the bill be agreed.
Second.
Sorry, so two schedules here.
It is moved and seconded that the schedule of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye. Those who oppose say nay. The schedule of the bill is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that the bill be now agreed in its entirety.
Second.
It is moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The bill is agreed in its entirety.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, with respect to a bill for an act to provide for substantial economic presence and annual reporting of a commercial entity carrying on relevant activities and for connected purposes, to repeal the Commercial Entities Substance Requirement Act 2018 and for connected purposes, I move that the long title of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The long title of the bill is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that the short title of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The short title of the bill is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that clauses 3 to 33 be agreed.
Second.
Oh, sorry. Went fast. I'm sorry. Section, Mr. Chairman, I move that clauses 2 to 33 be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that clauses 2 through 33 of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. Clauses 2 through 33 of the bill are agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that the first and second schedule to the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the first and second schedule to the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The first and second schedule of the bill are agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that the bill be now agreed in its entirety.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The bill is agreed in its entirety.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, with respect to a bill for an act to provide for the protection of and support for women victims of violence, to establish the Protection Against Violence Commission, Freudian, to enable the Bahamas to fulfill certain obligations arising under regional and international treaties and for matters connected therewith, I move that the long title of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The long title of the bill is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that the short title of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The short title of the bill is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that clauses 2 through 42 be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that clauses 2 through 42 of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. Clauses 2 through 42 of the bill are agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that the schedule to the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the schedule to the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The schedule to the bill is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that the bill be now agreed in its entirety.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The bill is agreed in its entirety.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that Madam President do now take the chair.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that Madam President do now take the chair. As many are in favor say aye. Aye. Those who oppose say nay. The motion is carried. Madam President will now take the chair. Madam President, I beg leave to report that the Committee of the Whole has examined all bills before the committee, having made no amendments thereto.
Honorable members, the Vice President and Chairman of the Committee of the Whole has reported that the committee has examined various bills, having made no amendments thereto. Third reading and passing of bills.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move for third reading and passing of a bill for an act to amend the Antiquities, Monuments, and Museum Act to regulate and update the law relating to recovery of underwater cultural heritage.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a third time and passed. As many are as in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion is carried. Order that the bill be read a third time and passed.
A bill for an act to amend the Antiquities, Monuments and Museum Act to regulate and update the law relating to recovery of underwater cultural heritage.
Order that this bill do now pass and the title thereof declared to be Antiquities, Monument, and Museum Amendment Act 2023. For the third reading of bills.
Yes, Madam President. Madam President, I move for third reading and passing of a bill for an act to inspire, promote, and sustain a culture of volunteerism throughout the Bahamas.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a third time and passed. As many are as in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion is carried. Order that the bill be read for a third time and passed.
A bill for an act to inspire, promote, and sustain a culture of volunteerism throughout the Bahamas.
Order that this bill do now pass and the title thereof declared to be Governor General's Volunteer Act 2023. For the third reading of bills.
Yes, Madam President, I move for third reading and passing of a bill for an act to amend the Magistrates Act.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a third time and passed. As many are as in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion is carried. Order that the bill be read a third time and passed.
A bill for an act to amend the Magistrates Act.
Order that this bill do now pass and the title thereof declared to be Magistrates Amendment Act 2022. For the third reading of bills.
Yes, Madam President. Madam President, I move for third reading and passing of a bill for an act to establish a parliamentary service for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, to provide for a parliamentary service commission, its membership, functions, procedures, and responsibilities, to provide for the transfer of public service officers to the parliamentary service, and for the continuation of their service on the same terms and conditions, and for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a third time and passed. As many are as in favor say aye.
Aye.
The motion is carried. Order that the bill be read for a third time and passed.
A bill for an act to establish a parliamentary service for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, to provide for a parliamentary service commission, its membership, functions, procedures, and responsibilities, to provide for the transfer of public service officers to the parliamentary service and for the continuation of their service on the same terms and conditions, and for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto.
Order that this bill do now pass and the title thereof declared to be Parliamentary Service Act 2023. For the third reading of bills.
Yes, Madam President. Madam President, I move for third reading and passing of a bill for an act to provide for substantial economic presence and annual reporting of a commercial entity carrying on relevant activities and for connected purposes, to repeal the Commercial Entities Substance Requirement Act 2018 and for connected matters.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a third time and passed. As many are as in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion is carried. Order that the bill be read a third time and passed.
A bill for an act to provide for substantial economic presence and annual reporting of a commercial entity carrying on relevant activities and for connected purposes, to repeal the Commercial Entities Substance Requirements Act 2018 and for connected matters.
Order that this bill do now pass and the title thereof declared to be Commercial Entities Substance Requirements Act 2023. For the third reading of bills.
Yes, Madam President. Madam President, I move for third reading and passing of a bill for an act to provide for the protection of and support for victims of violence, to establish the Protection Against Violence Commission, to enable the Bahamas to fulfill certain obligations arising under regional and international treaties, and for matters connected therewith.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a third time and passed. As many as in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion is carried. Order that the bill be read a third time and passed.
A bill for an act to provide for the protection of and support for victims of violence, to establish the Protection Against Violence Commission, to enable the Bahamas to fulfill certain obligations arising under regional and international treaties, and for matters connected therewith.
Order that this bill do now pass and the title thereof declared to be Protection Against Violence Act 2023.
Say it loud, say it loud.
Protection Against Violence Act 2023. For the third reading of bills.
There are none, Madam President.
Consideration of House amendments. Resolutions.
Madam President, I will move the following resolution, which was debated as a compendium with the Parliamentary Service Bill. And so we can just move this. I will read the resolution and we can move directly to the vote following a second. Whereas the Interparliamentary Union is a body that seeks to promote peace and security, democracy and human rights, the rule of law, and sustainable development, and whereas the Interparliamentary Union is recognized as the global organization of national parliaments, which clearly attests to the willingness of nations to build strong ties of interparliamentary dialogue and cooperation with a view to better meeting the needs and expectations of citizens for a safer and more equitable world. And whereas the Parliament of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas recognizes that interparliamentary contacts and cooperation can help strengthen the institution and lead to stronger engagement at the regional and international levels. And whereas the Parliament of the Bahamas is desirous of requesting membership of the IPU, and whereas the Parliament, in making application for membership, has to decide on a number of administrative arrangements for its participation as a member, hereby proposes to constitute a committee comprising of 5 persons to have responsibility for organization of the relations and activities of the Parliament with the IPU. And whereas Parliament may make guidelines on how it will function as an IPU member, now therefore be it resolved that this House approves Parliament being a member of the Interparliamentary Union, approves the constitution of a committee comprising of 5 persons to have responsibility for organization of the relations and activities of Parliament with Interparliamentary Union, approves the making of guidelines by Parliament on how it will function as a member of the Interparliamentary Union.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the following resolution be agreed. Whereas the Interparliamentary Union, IPU, is a body that seeks to promote peace and security, democracy and human rights, the rule of law, and sustainable development. And whereas Parliament may make guidelines as to how it will function as an IPU member, now therefore be it resolved that this House approves Parliament being a member of the Interparliamentary Union, approves the constitution of a committee comprising of 5 persons to have responsibility for organization of the relations and activities of Parliament with Interparliamentary Union, approves the making of guidelines by Parliament and how it function as a member of the Interparliamentary Union. As many are in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion is carried. Discharge of select committees. Notices of future meetings.
Madam President, I wish to renew all notices in the name of the government.
Orders for clerk. Adjournment.
Madam President, thank you. We are proposing that when we do adjourn, we will adjourn sine die. It is anticipated that we will proceed to the summer recess. So I just want to take this opportunity before we do adjourn to thank all members for their participation and contributions during this session. It's been sometimes a very long session, but members have risen to the task to study the issues and to make very, very, what I think were informed and sometimes very, very passionate contributions. I just want as well, Madam President, to finally echo the sentiments expressed in her serial of devotions by our chaplain this morning, imploring us to appreciate the tremendous responsibility that we have in this place and the opportunity that where we are placed to do some good to impact our country. I think that's a good place to leave off as we proceed to the recess and some rest and refreshment so that when we do return, we will return renewed and invigorated to continue to do the business of the people. So, Madam President, with that, I move that the Senate at its rising do adjourn sine die.
Is there a seconder? Second. It has been moved and seconded that the House at its rising do adjourn sine die. As many as in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Final adjournment.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move that the Senate do now adjourn.
Is there a seconder? Second. It has been moved and seconded that the Senate do now adjourn. As many as in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion is carried. The Senate stands adjourned. Sine die.